Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's time for the big moment. I know the chat is quiet at the moment. I'm hoping that'll change here shortly. And if not, hopefully anyone rewatching it through the VODs has a good enough time as it is. Like, it's a little disappointing sometimes to feel like you put a lot of effort into a series and it just feels like not as many people care about it as you do, and there's just nothing I can do about that. The feast! So, it's not going to hamper my enjoyment of the series, and hopefully anybody who's been watching this, say, on YouTube in post or whichever, has been enjoying it, because it's definitely been a lot of fun for me. So, we're going into the second half of the final case. The final chapter, however you want to phrase it. And the plan is to not stop until we are done. There is a estimation of 3 hours left of the game-ish, so I'm counting myself for some time to emote. So, on the 4th of November, 9:30, the Old Bailey courtroom. Oh, we're just in the courtroom today. We're just in here. Before we begin today, I have a brief announcement. Everybody, I got an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog's... No. As with the closed trial 10 years ago, some astonishing facts have come to light in these proceedings. The revelation that the well-known Reaper is actually an organization illegally executing its own brand of justice. And the discovery that a respected yard inspector was at its heart until he himself perished in an assassination plot. Well, I say to all members of the judiciary here present on this occasion, that we will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Counsels, you will undertake this trial with the resolve to pursue the truth to the bitter end. Resolve, yes. That's my intention. My lord, if I may inquire, the defendant may speak. On what grounds is Kazuma Asogi permitted to continue in his role as prosecutor? He has admitted to concluding with the victim in a plot to assassinate an innocent man. He shouldn't be enjoying the privilege of freedom, let alone be leading the prosecution. True, though. I submitted a written petition to Lord Strongheart, requesting that judgment of my transgressions be delayed by 1 day. You did what? In today's proceedings, I intend to expose everything. My whole life for the last 10 years has all been leading up to this 1 day. Kazuma, whatever the outcome of this trial, I give my word that I will accept whatever punishment is deemed appropriate, however severe. And I suggest you prepare yourself for the same, Reaper. Dude, he is still honest. Kazuma's bristling with hostility today. I get the distinct impression we're heading into very dangerous territory. Is that really even Kazuma-sama standing before us? As an extreme exception to normal practices, I have granted this prosecutor's request. The defense finds this acceptable, I presume. Well, what choice do we have? Yes, my lord? In that case, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session again. We resume the closed hearing of Barak von Zinks. I think this is the first time in the entire series since the first Ace Attorney game where they've actually had to use 3 days of trial. This may be the very first time. since then that they've needed 3 days of trial, which honestly is a pretty interesting thing to do. It's the only trial of this whole game that used 3 days. I know the whole 3-day thing with the first game was mostly just an arbitrary thing because of how they chose to plot it out, because they didn't need it ever again, but there's something about the 3-day time limit or whatever, or the 3 days of trial, that just gives a different air of importance to the third day of it. Anyway, this music is intense. The defense is ready, my lord. The prosecution is more than ready. Very well, then. This preamble has taken long enough. Prosecutor Asogi, begin! As you wish, my lord. The prosecution calls the first witness to the stand. Brings Chihiro Jigoku to the courtroom! At last, then, we've reached the final battle. He's putting literally everything on the line now in order to get the truth. Come on, Ryunosuke, it's time for that steely resolve, because this is going to test it to the limit. There he is. Witness, state your name and occupation for the court. Ha! So it was you who issued this, was it? Your subpoena? I did what was necessary. Well, look what the young man has become. I didn't think I'd see the day when you'd take that tone with me, I must say. The witness will ensure his responses are pertinent to the questions asked. My name is Chihiro Jigoku, a Supreme Court judge from the Empire of Japan. 16 years ago, this man came to London as a visiting student, and 6 years later, he returned to Japan. As well as presiding over the Supreme Court, he is also currently Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. I am, of course, fully aware of Mr. Jigoku and his preeminent roles. I invited him personally to the International Forensic Science Symposium as a representative of his country. I hear he also played a key role in the conclusion of the Anglo-Japanese Treaty of Friendship and Navigation. It was a great honor to be involved in the negotiation. I just put my all into that treaty. Judge Jigoku, I must ask. Well, I never. Fancy the young murdering student turning up here of all places. You acquitted me yourself, and now I'm a practicing defense lawyer. Yes, and full of self-importance, like your friend across the courtroom, I see. You came here to London by invitation to the International Forensic Science Symposium, but then, without informing anyone of your plans, you took flight to France. Took flight? I'd have to object to that turn of phrase. Then explain yourself. What exactly were the circumstances? Well, I was somewhat expecting this, and I'm sorry to say, I decline to comment. What? Leaving the country prematurely when I was an invited guest may be questionable etiquette, but my decision is unrelated to this case. I can't be bound to testify. Unrelated, you say? That's bold, man. I appreciate that a respected police inspector has been killed, for which I offer my condolences. However, being an alien, I'd obviously never met the man, nor do I know the first thing about him. As such, I'm in no position to testify. It's as simple as that. So you would run from all this? I beg your pardon? This case is more far-reaching than the murder of Inspector Gregson. It has ties to another murder, a case that was tried in Japan almost a year ago now. A year ago in Japan? The murder of Dr. John H. Wilson, you mean? That's right. And you, Judge Jigoku, are at the heart of both cases. The defense has evidence to prove it. Well, Ryunosuke, I see from the look in your eyes that you're resolved to carry this through to the very end, too. Well, let's see your evidence, then. What proof do you have that Chihiro Jigoku is involved in this case? Hasanaga. This music's so good. This is a telegram detailing a communication sent between Britain and Japan approximately 1 year ago. The communication contained 4 names: Keisogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, and J. Wilson. You little... Where did you get that? In Tokyo. From your office, Judge Jigoku. What? How on earth did you... What's this all about? Why is my name on that list? This list of 4 names follows a certain pattern. T. Gregson and J. Wilson are the names of victims. Keisogi, and A. Shin are the names of assassins. No! A year ago in Tokyo, Dr. John H. Wilson's life was taken in a Western-style restaurant in the capital. The culprit was found to be a visiting student who went by the name of Giselle Brett, but her real name was Asia Shin, a professional killer sent on a mission to kill from Great Britain. A. Shin and her victim J. Wilson. And the murder that just took place here in London was the counterpart to that crime. An assassination sent from Japan, also a visiting student, Kazuma Sogi, whose victim was the British police inspector, Tobias Gregson. Keisogi and T. Gregson. One assassin from each country to kill a target residing in the other. What exactly is the defense suggesting? These 2 cases of murder, one that took place in Britain and one in Japan, were masterminded by a pair of individuals from each country as a form of an assassin exchange. And the telegram the defense has acquired is proof of this international contract to kill. What? The telegram was found in your office, Judge Jigoku. In other words, the mastermind in Japan was you. Judge Jigoku, what is this all about? And you, Kazuma, you lied. During yesterday's proceedings, you acknowledged that you'd accepted the assassination mission. But the mark wasn't Judge Jigoku at all. It was T. Gregson, Detective Inspector of Scotland Yard, as shown by the name on the killing contract. Very impressive, Ryunosuke. But actually, I didn't lie. The name of the target I was ordered to kill never passed my lips yesterday. The idea that Chihiro Jigoku was the mark came entirely from you. You deliberately avoided saying a name. The defense claims that these 4 names indicate some sort of international assassin exchange. I'm sure I speak for all present when I say that the very idea seems utterly absurd. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what do you have to say for yourself? His silence only goes to prove his guilt. There's another very important point that this new development brings to light. There's now a distinct possibility that the scene of the Inspector Gregson's actual murder was the witness's cabin aboard the SS Groose. Judge Jigoku, you have to testify now. To refuse would put you in contempt of court. There's no need for quite such a vicious stare, young man. I know his voice has shifted, but that older voice doesn't work as well. Very well, then. As a parting gift to you all, I'll tell you everything I know. It seems that this Japanese gentleman has information that the court must hear about the alleged assassin exchange in the events of the night of the 31st of October. Present your formal testimony now. As you wish, my lord. Their voices are becoming too similar. When you say them side by side, voicing is difficult. The assassin exchange. It's true that Kazuma Soki was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour. However, in the end, something happened. That meant the young man wasn't able to carry out his mission. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times. If there had been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it. So clearly I can't be involved. So you admit it then. As this communication suggests, there really was an assassin exchange arrangement between Britain and Japan. A political endeavor at the highest levels. Nothing I can discuss here. To use such worthy practices for study to coerce somebody to commit murder. It's the most appalling thing I've ever heard. Appalling? Well, it's easy to judge. Pardon? Asogi had a reason for taking his sword to that British inspector, you know. What? Which is why he accepted the mission in the first place. Isn't that right, Counsel? Kazuma-sama? How else would they have allowed him to take the sword? Judge Jigoku, if you are the mastermind behind this operation in Japan, then tell the court the identity of your counterpart in Britain. I'm not obliged to divulge that information. As I said yesterday, I've killed nobody. I freely admit that I accepted the mission, but on the night the plan was to be executed, I backed out. In short, this assassin exchange that the defense has identified is unrelated to the events of the case. The crucial point is this. Your police inspector can't have perished aboard that steamship in Dunkirk. Because if he had been shot in the cabin, it's inconceivable that a member of the crew wouldn't have heard it. That's right. Gregson was killed after returning to London. In the room on Fresno Street. We're still pushing this. And the perpetrator of the crime was the Reaper, Barrack von Zeeks. The prosecution's accusation remains unchanged. To think that a seemingly innocent foreign exchange program was a facade for such Malchavian dealings. Clearly, it's a plot only a government minister and high-ranking judge such as the witness could hope to execute. Well, I seem to recall that it was someone on the British side who controlled everything. Be that as it may, it is not the place of this court to pursue this villainous assassin exchange plot. We are concerned only with the tangible events pertaining to the murder of Inspector Gregson. Is the defense clear on that point, counsel? Bruh. Yes, my lord, I'll keep that in mind as I cross-examine the witness. Alright. A year ago, when Kazuma was still in Japan then. Correct. It was at the examination center for applicants for the study tour that I approached him. I'll never forget it. I remember exactly what you said. You just came out and asked me forthright if I'd consider traveling to Britain on an assassination mission. Surely not. I thought it was a joke at first, of course, but then it was made clear to me that if I didn't accept, I wouldn't be considered for the study tour. So you agreed to it, just for that? I mean, I know how much you wanted to study in England, but assassination? The Empire of Japan had accepted a proposal from the British Empire at the time. An agreement to send a student from each country to the others to deepen cultural understanding and friendship. But behind the scenes, the chosen students were to be given assassination missions. I had no choice but to accept the proposal that originated from my British counterpart. Why? Why didn't you expose the plot there and then? Britain acknowledges no part in these alleged misbegotten dealings. I advise you not to make spurless allegations, Foreign Minister Jigoku. As a witness, I'm bound to tell the truth, my lord. Anyway, I picked Asogi and explained the details of the plan to him. Bro, I love this clashing of these legal people. Why Kazuma? Why did you pick him as the assassin? He was the most capable of all the applicants, and in addition, I knew his desire to travel to Britain was very strong. In fact, it was almost more than a desire, it was his whole purpose in life. Yes, as his best friend, I can certainly attest to that. The way he threw himself into his studies, the way he pursued becoming qualified as a lawyer, it was all ultimately for that one single goal of being accepted on a study tour to Britain. And of course, we know the reason behind that. He was determined to find out for himself the truth about his father, Genshin Asogi. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to get here. Be that agreeing to assume the role of an assassin, or betraying people's trust. Well, you certainly did a fine job of betraying my Asogi. But why was Inspector Gregson the target? I have no idea. Those were the orders from Britain. I was in no position to question them. You have no idea, really? I find that hard to believe. Oh, do you? Jigoku was once visiting here in Britain himself, of course. Perhaps he has some connection with Inspector Gregson from that time. The defense really ought to catch up! With what? With the fact that the assassin exchange has absolutely nothing to do with the case under scrutiny here. Yes, I've already admitted to recruiting Asogi. I presume you're referring to the incident that occurred during Kazuma's passage to Britain in January. The awful tragedy that took place on the steamship. Word arrived at the ministry some 2 weeks after the ship's departure from our shores. The visiting student had been killed, but his body had somehow gone missing in Hong Kong. The news was wired to me from a detective I'd placed on the ship to accompany the assassin. Obviously, Kazuma didn't actually die at all, but he did lose his memory, including all details about his special mission. Did you not consider dispatching another assassin at that point? That wasn't possible, simply because that black-clad young student over there had already put himself forward as Asogi's replacement, and there was no way to stop him from reaching Britain. My hands were completely tied. So Mr. Sholmes' strategy worked perfectly. He predicted everything that would happen. Months later, my memory returned, but I never intended to go through with the assassination mission anyway. So you were playing me right out from the onset, were you? Is that it? I'd sooner be guilty of that crime than taking someone else's life. I was prepared to do whatever I had to in order to get myself here to Britain. This line of questioning has gone on long enough. All the court should be concerned about in the testimony given by this witness are details relating to his relationship with Inspector Gregson and the victim's murder. In that case, as I've already made perfectly clear, I had no connection to the man or his death. And you have some means of substantiating this plea. Hey, Ramirez, welcome in. Okay. Outside your cabin, in the first-class area of the SS Grush, you mean? Yes, that's right. Not least because there was a murder of a student passenger early in the year, I imagine. The liner operators have taken to posting a crewman outside every first-class cabin door. I can confirm the presence of the crewman guard myself. Now, you're fine, Ramirez. I don't know where everybody else is, but that's just the way it is. What do you mean? Because I accompanied Inspector Grayson to Dunkirk that night. I witnessed it with my own eyes. There was a well-built crewman standing guard directly in front of the door to the witness's cabin. At that particular time, of course, I'd gone to the ship's dining room for dinner. The inspector and I asked the crewmen to allow us into the cabin where we waited for Judge Jigoku's return. I suppose Mr. Gregson was there in his capacity as the Reaper. He was intending to take the witness's life. Exactly. As I've said numerous times now, I had no intention of killing anyone. So, the crewman let two potential assassins into the cabin he was supposed to be guarding? Not the most convincing of centuries, really. In truth, those were my thoughts too. But anyway, I stayed to talk with Inspector Gregson for a short while, and then I left him there and made my way off the ship alone. Was the guard still at the door when you went? Yes. He glared at me as I walked past. You see? That proves it. Bull, I still don't believe you, Jigoku. The crewman who was standing directly outside your cabin door, you mean? That's right. A muscular man with a permanent grim expression on his face. He didn't move once from that spot. To be honest, I thought he was a miserable fellow. But, as it happens, he's a vital witness now. There's no doubt that Gregson was killed by a gunshot, and it's inconceivable that a crewman sitting just outside the cabin door wouldn't have heard that. But wait, what about the ship's enormous steam engines? The noise of them could have drowned out the sound of the gun being fired. Sadly, young judicial assistant, that won't wash. Oh. You will recall that my cabin was in the first-class area of the ship, which is also, of course, the quietest. Don't imagine for a moment that it's anything like Stair Age where the judicial assistants go. I didn't mean... But a hole like that made by a sound of a bullet was found in your cabin, Judge Jigoku. What's compelling evidence that the gun was fired there? So this guy, Ramirez, is the judge from Japan. He came visiting with Sasato's father to Japan. That he was invited here by Strongheart for the big symposium thing or whatever. So he was here as a guest, but it turns out he may have been potentially an assassin victim, and he tried to quietly leave the country while making it seem like he had died. So we're not entirely, but that's who he is. It's harder to recognize him without his judge clothes. What's that? A bullet hole? Oh, yes! You're talking about what the detective uncovered in the wall yesterday, I presume? That was obviously a rotten panel eaten out by a woodworm. No, they didn't find an actual bullet. That's the hole in this argument. Sadly, I was unable to arrange for the crewmen to be brought back to Japan with me. Or to Britain with me. But obviously, if a gun had been fired in my cabin on the night in question, as the defense implies, I would have been arrested on the spot and would have never made it to Britain in the first place. Very true. The witness's logic is sound, since no gunshot was heard from the witness's cabin on the night in question. We must assume that the witness is telling the truth. I'm glad you've seen sense, my lord. Alright, no, Kazu was already admitted to taking on his own incredible assassination plot, but even so, hearing it confirmed by somebody else is still a real shock. It's unforgivable. Using Kazuma-sama's feelings to manipulate him into agreeing to such a despicable plan. But I think Kazuma manipulated Judge Jigoku too. He completely double-crossed him. Oh dear. It's hard not to see that as a stroke of brilliance on Kazuma-sama's part. Or one way or another, I suppose, though. Gregson ended up dead. I really think that murder must have happened aboard the steamship. So you mean Judge Jigoku must be lying. I know I shouldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. But you must destroy him, Mr. Naruhodo. Okay, so let's have a look at our... Following departure from Port Dunkirk, all crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. in order to review evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes, okay? So there's that. A small component. You see these little things all over the place, don't you? It's the part on top of a pocket watch that you twist to set the time, isn't it? It's called the crown, I believe. A watch would be quite useless without one. The crown? Like what sits on top of a monarch's head? That's a very grand name for such a tiny part. But actually, yes, Mr. Naruhodo? If this is a crown, I feel like I might have seen a monarch around here with a somewhat very bare head. If by monarch you mean pocket watch, then I'm quite sure you have. Okay. Okay, inspect the watch to confirm that? What do you think, Miss Sasuto? I feel sure I know exactly what will fit here. Really? I was just thinking precisely the same thing. We're about to see that little round component. It's actually part of the broken pocket watch. Really? I was just thinking precisely that too. A perfect fit. I knew it. Alright, perhaps you knew it. I'll make note of this new information at once. Okay. So we have that piece of information now. Okay. So I have the information for this one. Not so fast, Mr. Goku. Yes, as the court heard, there was a crewman posted outside Judge Goku's cabin. However, we can be sure that, contrary to the witness's claim, the guard wasn't there at all times. What? I have here a notice of a particular event that was scheduled to take place aboard the steamship on the 31st. What? Where did you get that? It's evidence gathered by Mr. Herlock Sholmes. You were acquainted yesterday, if you remember. Herlock Sholmes again. According to this itinerary, after leaving the port of Dunkirk at exactly 10 p.m. and for a period of 20 minutes, all crewmen of the SS Grus were to gather on deck for an evacuation drill. All crewmen were away from their posts? And during that 20-minute interval, of course, any gunshots emanating from your cabin would have been heard by no one. In summary, Judge Jigoku, you had ample opportunity to commit the crime. Ugh! Objection. A 20-minute window of opportunity. That's an excellent find, Ryunosuke. But it amounts to nothing. Why? Because the witness clearly stated in his testimony that no incident occurred in his cabin. Unless you have some decisive evidence that can show his testimony to be false, your accusation is nothing more than conjecture. Very true. Well, counsel. Inspector Gregson was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin that night, I'm certain of it. Because the defense has the evidence to prove it. You will present the evidence for the defense at once, counsel. It is. This whole case is corruption. What proof do you have that the victim's life was taken in Jigoku's cabin on the 31st of October? The component. Judge Jigoku, this was found in your cabin yesterday. What is that? The crown of a pocket watch? A pocket watch? And if you will observe, the victim's pocket watch, which we know he treasured, is missing precisely that part. It can't be. Moreover, this crown is a perfect fit on the spindle protruding from the victim's watch. Now, the fact that this was retrieved from Judge Jigoku's cabin tells us that the victim's watch almost certainly broke there. Ugh. In other words, the victim was killed on the 31st during the 20-minute evacuation drill. In the cabin occupied by you, Judge Jigoku. Well, you're razor sharp, aren't you, you young murderer? Oh, shut up, Kazuma! Expertly maneuvered, Ryunosuke. And your argument sounds entirely plausible. At first. But rather like this pocket watch, it's full of cracks. What? Seriously, and I believe Judge Jigoku feels the same way. I was wrong to get you earlier in the year. Oh, frick off! Sorry? If I'd known that it would result in anyone having to listen to this drivel, I would have declared you guilty just to spare the world of your ridiculous bombast. Oh, shut up! I think it's clear that the witness will have to give further testimony. When you hear what actually happened in my cabin that night, you'll notice the pitfall in which you've stumbled. Prior to your renewed testimony, I would like to clarify one point. The fact that this part of the victim's watch was discovered in your cabin means that you acknowledge he was there, I presume. Yes, I do. Very well, then. You may proceed to give your formal testimony about what exactly happened in your cabin aboard the ship on the evening of the 31st of October. If you dare. Of course, as a man of the law, I have no intention of obstructing justice. He said like a liar. You want to be innocent or not? Events in the cabin. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. I soon took care of him with an ippon sui throw, though. He couldn't wait to run away after that. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. There's nothing to do with his murder. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London. He said like a liar. Ippon sui. A common jujitsu martial arts technique in my country. I was careful not to use too much force, but the man obviously landed too heavily for his watch to take. So, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, I imagine you can see the flaw in your logic now, can't you? What? The fact that the pocket watch was broken in the witness's cabin in no way proves the victim's murder took place there. Oh my god. I have no doubt the inspector intended to kill me. But he didn't manage to pull the trigger. Yes, because he was merely the tactician, not the Reaper's hand of death. No. See, here's what we're going on now at this point here, isn't it? It's the fact that we've been operating on the pretense that Tobias Gregson, our chip-loving inspector, was the murderer. Was the attempted murderer, and that he was probably chasing information on the Reaper and stuff. So at the end, that really means that Gregson was not an assassin. He was studying the Reaper's movements, and he used his old friend to cover up his movements. So, but the fact that everyone here is openly admitted to the fact that Judge Jigoku had picked Kazuma with the purpose to kill Gregson. And Kazuma wasn't gonna do it. He's like, frick that, I'm not doing it. And left him high and dry, because he didn't give a crap. He didn't want anyone dead. He's not a murderer. But what that meant, because Jigoku, in order to keep the relationships between the countries stable, Gregson still needed to die as part of the contract, basically. He still needed to die, and that responsibility was still on Judge Jigoku, because he's the one who messed up in picking Kazuma to murder him, and he wouldn't do it. The fact that alone should be incriminating enough, but we still have to entertain the fact that we can't prove he didn't die there, when all of this points to it. Well, the testimony appears to make perfect sense as far as I can tell. Let me express my deep gratitude for your understanding, my lord. But if this testimony holds, Jijigoku will be deemed to have no involvement in the case. Well, counsel, I really see no reason for wasting precious court time here in a cross-examination. I don't give a crap if you were wasting time. Sorry, my lord. The defense has a right to cross-examine, and I don't intend to squander that. You're an embarrassment to your countrymen, not knowing when you were beaten. In that case, proceed, Mr. Naruhodo. Cross-examination. Okay, so I need to fish from my inn. Okay. Because the so-called guard posted at your cabin door had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector. Which was the truth, of course. Yes, though he wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. But the man accompanying him would have had 2 swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might set the alarm bells off in the guard's head. The point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned, and I immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly. All I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back in my cabin. And he entered without any inkling of suspicion. That's right. None of whatsoever. Okay. Obviously, you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time I didn't know the man's name, and there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean that the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose. That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. But I'd never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. You sure did. Whatcha? Even though the man had a gun, that was a very brave move, wasn't it? My upon-soy is far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. There is no jury in this trial. Because it's a matter of high governmental security, it's a closed trial with no jury. The crowd is watching as members of the governmental judiciary, but the jury itself is not present because it's a private trial. Which is all due to control the situation. It's all another blow against us to control the narrative. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector hurled himself at the stocky fellow and just managed to slip past him to make his escape. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of using a quick upon-swift throw. The crown snapped off, and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off or his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long. A bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken posture watch doesn't prove that the murder took place. Absolutely not! All the watch proves is the power of my jujitsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin. Because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. What are you talking about? That's what the star of your lowbrow detective stories told you, is it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. But there's no evidence that proves the victims never returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. What? If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, how on earth could he have got back to Britain? When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. Well, then, obviously the culprits have moved the body. How exactly? Carrying a corpse off a ship with your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Well, yes, that's true, but all passenger luggage is inspected when it is unloaded from arriving vessels, and I would like to think that the border police would query the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. If the murder had taken place aboard the ship, you would imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. Ugh, it's killed that idea then. Fair point. But perhaps not. Miss Sasato? We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crew when posted to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. True. Yes, that's true. So transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? I thought I'd been perfectly clear, but it seems I'm gonna have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony, with your consent, of course, my lord. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. There's no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain. Why is that? There's an idea. Think about it, stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks at the border. The symposium guests were then given straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry. And we met you as soon as you arrived at the hotel. So you did! Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? What? No! So we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless, of course, they developed some clever device these days to instantly move things from A to B. Oh, let's not even. Funny you should say that. Professor Harebrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, of course. The defense has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say. So that's his story. Well, I suppose if you think about it, whenever you drop a teacup in an office and it breaks, we don't say, Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we? Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one? And the fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on the Fresno Street. If he really was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin, the body would have had to have been moved somehow, obviously. Transporting a dead body over a country border, that would be impossible for the majority of people. So there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then. Yeah! That would be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo. Okay, where is it in the court record? They mentioned the fact that Judge Jigoku got through border check first because he was a visiting, he was an invited guest to the country, and he got to skip the security. Do I have evidence of that anywhere? I know exactly what's happening here. Okay, so if you remember back when we were in the room last night, there was a glass of water with ice in it. The ship has its own cooling thing that keeps ice cool. So Jigoku only has to get the body to the refrigeration to keep it from aging. And then his luggage is not searched because he's a diplomatic. Is there any evidence that I can prove that? There's the case is here. We've had that for so long, it's gotta be irrelevant. Okay. Alright, let's go with it. Wrong one! I hit the wrong button. Okay, that was the wrong photo. That was I hit the wrong one. Well, now I need to save because I accidentally freaking beefed my HP. Halftime show, was it good? I haven't really paid any attention to it, so... I usually... No, nah. Didn't mean to press. Hold on. Be faster to load. Usher. Did he perform? The fact that these two photos are in the same spot on different pages bothers me. Okay. There's no possible way you could have moved Inspector Grayson's body, you say. I would say the opposite is true. And what is that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do. The transporting of Inspector Grayson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Ryunosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jigoku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Which means he's exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We learned that when we first met you upon your arrival in London. Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took a rather lot of time. I must say I'm very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you? Oh, I knew you were jealous. I presume you recall this, Judge Jigoku. It's a photograph we took in the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside. Mr. Naruhodo, you surely are not suggesting... I'm afraid I am, yes. 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Grayson was just meters away from us inside Judge Jigoku's trunk. Order, order, order in the court! I'm skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk. It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. And verifying that would be extremely simple. Wouldn't it, Judge Jigoku? But inside his trunk, it's all horrifying. And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the appearance scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Dr. Gorey, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She's acknowledged that there are signs and that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator. Oh my god. Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between. Yes, I'm sure they are. But one place they're certainly found is on large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages. Isolate. Man, I honestly expected Sora long before either of you two, but here we are. FYI, it's looking like Goku murdered him. Murdered our poor inspector. And the SS Groose is no exception. Professor Mikitoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jigoku. However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer. Well, this is all very heartening. I can see that it was a wise move, letting Asogi and you embark on this study tour. What are you talking about now? Logical reasoning, of course. All court proceedings will be built on logical reasoning in the new century. And I can see that you both laid firm foundations for that already. Judge Jigoku, please stop diverting attention from the issue at hand. The defense has made an accusation against you. How do you respond? Respond? There's really no need for me to respond, is there? Why ever not? Because before you can even begin to answer the question of when the victim was killed, you must first establish one key fact. Where was the victim killed? It's quite logical. The actual scene of the crime. The prosecution's stance is unaltered. The killing took place on Fresno Street when the gunshot was heard. Bro, we've disproved that so many times. The firecrackers, the fact that the body's time of death was altered. How are we still going on this? Kazuma, you're clinging to nothing. There's more evidence against that now than there is for it. Oh, the black-eyed pose. Man, it's been a long time since I did the Kirby 64. As the accused, Barrett Von Zeke shot the victim at point-blank range. Since no tangible evidence exists to disprove the prosecution's claim at this time, the defense's deductions amount to little more than an elaborate fairy tale. That's bull! I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning in the British are known for. I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning the British are known for really works, young stripling. Throw it out. This proves so long ago even I was there for it. The victim was shot in that little room on Fresno Street and died instantly. I'm afraid it's the prosecution's claim that's the only fairy tale here. Yeah, you get him! How can you say that? Quite simply, because that claim directly contradicts a certain piece of evidence in our possession. Very tantalizing, counsel. I think you had better explain yourself to the court, don't you? The prosecution claims that the Inspector Grayson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street. But this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. What do we have? Was it this one? Oh god, I need to save. I'm pretty sure it's the travel case. I'm pretty it has to be the travel case.
Take that.
The Japanese what? Nah, we're reloading. Welcome back, Sora. Okay, or welcome, Sora. We think Judge Jigoku did it. As it turns out, Judge Jigoku had specifically hired Kazuma to murder Gregson from the outset, essentially. Okay, so if it's not his travel trunk, then is it? The bullet exited the body from behind. Okay, I think it's this then. Are we? I'm really gonna throw you out with the bathwater. Wait, then the One Piece is real. The casual racism, exactly. Okay. Is it the watch?
Take that!
Nope. Okay, so what... Okay. What? Okay, so let's review the question again. The victim was shot in the front door room and died instantly. The only fairy tale. It contradicts the evidence. But what evidence does him being shot instantly contradict? Wait, what? I give up. What is it? I don't understand. I presented all the relevant pieces of information at this point. Okay, so it's the photo then. The problem is, how does this disprove that?
Take that!
A photograph of the victim in the very location you claim he wasn't killed? Good question. Yes, but the point is, the posture of the body itself. You know, I did look at that and think that, but I also thought, there is no way we're gonna logic leap that way. We sure as heck are. If Inspector Grayson had been shot there, in that room, it's out of the question that his body would have been curled up in a ball like that. You know, that does make sense. You would think if you were just shot and you were up there and they had witnesses up there instantly, you wouldn't have had the time to curl up like that. That's not a natural... If you died instantly, you just fall, like, backwards or forwards, like, limp. You wouldn't curl up. I didn't think they were going to jump that logic. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your logic is flawed. You could easily have adopted that fetal position due to the pain of the shot, which subsequently proved fatal. Not if it was instant. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Judge Jigoku, but it's your logic that's flawed. What? According to this autopsy report, the victim died instantly. He would have felt no pain, much less have been able to draw himself into that position. Ugh! Which begs the question of why the victim's body is curled up in that way. Though the answer should be abundantly clear by now. You're suggesting. Yes! The inspector's body took on that posture ahead of its arrival on Fresno Street, before it was coldly turned out on the floor. From the inside of a large travel trunk. No! You're quite right. The shape of the body does not have been kept in a confined space. You died of cringe. Judge Jigoku, present your trunk for examination. I believe it's very possible that it will contain traces of the victim's blood. Ugh! Present my trunk. I refuse. What? On what grounds? I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Empire of Japan. I shouldn't have to put up with this treatment just because of some stripling's baseless accusations. In other words, Judge Jigoku, there is blood in your trunk. I decline to answer that. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have privileges that allow me to...
Objection.
I don't wanna. At this moment, you're not a government minister. You're a witness in a trial in Britain's highest court. I don't care who you are or what your status outside this courtroom might be. You will not withhold information. Yeah, you tell him! Nothing is more important than the truth. Ugh. Ugh. Order! Order in the court! Well, Mr. Jigoku, what's it to be? You can't be serious. You did it? Have you no shame at all, Kazuma Sogi? What? Very well, I admit it. I did bring the inspector's body into the country. Oh, he's still gonna deny he killed him, though. Inside my trunk, exactly as postulated by the defense. What? You? Dear God, outrageous! So it was you! You admit that... No, I admit to nothing more than what I've said. Of killing the man, I certainly have no recollection. What on earth is that cryptic statement supposed to mean? I merely disposed of the inspector's body, which was left in my cabin, in order to avoid unwanted attention. Just as the judicialist over there pointed out, I had no chance to throw it into the ocean. So... I didn't even hear it. Dang, I haven't heard that one before in a long time. So I decided my only option was to bring it into Britain with me and dispose of it somewhere else. You still can't deny it. If you didn't do it, then who on earth did kill the man? As you know...
Disappointed!
There we go. As you know, there was one other person in my cabin that night. He had the opportunity. And moreover, he'd already accepted a mission to take the inspector's life. Oh, we're gonna throw Kazuma under the bus now. That's right! Who else could it have been? It was you, Kazuma Sogi! You... I never thought you'd stoop to this, Shinshiro Goku! I've said that so badly. You've taken the words right out of my mouth, Prosecutor Kazuma Sogi. You thought by leaving the body in my cabin you could pin the crime on me, did you? Well, the prosecution counsel has already admitted to visiting the witness's cabin on the night in question. Yes, on an assassination mission, no less. You wouldn't! So, what do you make of that, young stripling? You've heard my testimony now, and that's all I have to say on the matter. I'll admit to nothing more. I don't believe this. Counsel for the defense? What is your position now? The court awaits your response to the witness's assertion. The assertion that on the night in question, the victim's assailant was in fact Mr. Kazuma Sogi. This isn't the dead end it seems to be. The answer's right in front of me. If it comes down to Jigoku, or Kazuma, both of them had the opportunity to kill Gregson, but only one of them did it. And I'm just a step away from proving who. Very well, the defense is ready to respond to the assertion put forward by Judge Jigoku. The idea that the victim's murder could have been committed by Prosecutor Sogi is impossible. Judge Jigoku, let me remind you of something you said only a few minutes ago. You claim that the logical reasoning is the future of the judicial process. It is, no question. Well, logical reasoning can prove something here. Namely, that it would have been impossible for Prosecutor Sogi to commit the crime. What? The court will only accept an argument that's supported by compelling evidence. So present what you have, counsel. What proof is there that allegedly demonstrates the impossibility of Prosecutor Asogi's involvement? Sasito did it. Is it the sword? Hold on, let's think. Well, there's that too. But we're looking at the impossibility. How do we prove it was impossible for Kazuma to have done it? That's what I need to look for. No, sword also has a sword. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's either the trunk or the sword. Oh, we need... Okay, we're looking for... Okay, I didn't think this, because of this thing. Obviously, we already know that Kazuma had checked into the hotel and had left before any of this had happened. That's his testimony. What do we have that corroborates that? And I didn't really think about it. But I guess... I think this is another one of those weird logic leaps, but does it make as much sense? I don't know how this proves what we want it to do, but, it's apparently the evacuation drill itinerary. Following the departure of the port of Dunkirk, all crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. in order to review the evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes. So here's the thing. See, okay, now I understand how the logic makes sense, I guess. We know that Gregson was killed in this 20-minute interval. And that's how Goku managed to move him into the refrigerator. But Kazuma had said he had left before this drill because when he had left, the guard was still there and was judging him for it. Now, granted, that... Okay, here's the thing. And that alone proves the fact that if it was while Kazuma was still there, someone would have heard the gunshot. Okay, so I get it. This kind of corroborates his testimony. I understand it now. The itinerary for the crew members of the SS Groose, my lord. This is the conclusive proof. An itinerary? How does that prove anything? Judge Jigoku, the moment you acknowledge that you found the victim's body in your cabin, this itinerary suddenly became much more significant. What? Why? On the night in question, as always, a crewman sentry was on guard outside your cabin door. As long as he was there, nobody could have fired a shot inside the cabin. Absolutely, because it's inconceivable that the guard would have heard it and come inside to investigate. So that tells us that the crime must have taken place when the guard was elsewhere. And that narrows it down to 20 minutes, just after 10 o'clock, as indicated on the itinerary. Yes, I see no flaw in your reasoning so far. But the crucial point is this. When the evacuation drill took place, the steamship had already put to sea from the port of Dunkirk. Oh, that I didn't know! I feel like I had missed that point. I didn't know they were at sea when the drill happened. Okay, that changes everything. Ugh! Now, clearly the murderer can only have been committed by somebody who was aboard the vessel at the time. But Prosecutor Sogi stated in yesterday's proceedings, flashback, I didn't come to Great Britain to take anyone's life, so I left Gregson and disembarked the ship. I spent that night at a boarding house in the town and returned to England the following morning. And he has a witness he has that corroborated, which I'm sure the court will agree is conclusive proof that Kazuma Sogi couldn't possibly have carried out the killing. Ugh! No, absolutely not. I don't accept that at all. What do you mean? The boy's just saying that to exonerate himself. We can't trust that he really disembarked the vessel. Obviously, after he left my cabin, he hid himself somewhere nearby on the ship. Just waiting for his chance to come back and finish the... Nope. No, that's out of the question. Isn't it, Kazuma? As the defense rightly recalls, I disembarked the vessel and spent the night in a boarding house in Dunkirk. And as I said yesterday, I signed my name in the accommodations register book. All extremely easy to verify and undeniable proof. Ugh! No, There's no escape this time. You can forget that you're a judge or a government minister. It's time you gave the court an honest answer, as a common man. Ugh. You killed Inspector Tobias Gregson and transported his corpse back to Britain. Then you dumped the body in the room on Fresno Street and made it look as if the murder had happened there. That's what really happened, isn't it, Shihiro Jigoku? It was that damned trial 10 years ago. That's when this all began. Looking back now, my fate was decided that day. I was doomed already. Ah! It's over! My life is over! A British assassin to eliminate a professor in Japan. A Japanese assassin to eliminate a detective in Britain. Both assassins will use diplomatic immunity to evade conviction and return safely to their homelands. The assassin exchange request arrived from Britain about 1 year ago. Though it was hardly a request, it was a demand. And for that, you decided to recruit Mr. Isogi. But things didn't go according to plan. You never made it to Britain. Your chosen assassin never made it to Britain. You find yourself unable to dispatch a replacement. Because I was already on my way to Britain at that time in Kazuma's place. And that left me with only one option for carrying out my obligation. To eliminate the mark myself, personally. Of course, there was but a single opportunity for me to do that. The International Forensic Science Symposium, I presume. That's right. I decided it would be safest to carry out the plan before my arrival in Britain. So I enlisted the help of my British counterpart and made arrangements for a pretext that would take the inspector to Dunkirk. To lure the man in, he was given a sham mission by the Reaper. What? The Reaper? We're still denying this stuff. But there's only one person who could have done that. The mastermind of the entire operation. The Reaper himself. Ah. So, that means that the assassin exchange was... It was all planned by the Reaper. I'm not at liberty to say anything about my British counterpart. Anyway, the inspector accepted the Reaper's mission and dutifully infiltrated my cabin on the steamship. It was all a trap designed to lead him to France and his own death. Oh, how awful. It was past 9 o'clock when I returned to my cabin from the dining hall that evening. I didn't give him time to attack me. I choked him until he lost consciousness. But there was a guard just outside the door, so I left it at that for the time being. Even the slightest noise might have aroused suspicion, so I bided my time, waiting. For the 20 minutes after 10 o'clock. I had intended to finish him by strangulation, but moments before I had the chance, he suddenly came around and went for me in a reckless move. I'd received the British issue gun 16 years earlier, being a member of the judiciary as a visiting student. I never imagined I'd have to use it for something like that. So, the revolver belongs to you, does it? Then the victim was killed inside your cabin on the SS Groose, which begs the question of why you arranged for his body to be discovered in the room in Fresno Street. The young judicial assistant over there has already answered that question. There was no way I could take the body up on deck to throw it over the side. That's precisely where all the crewmen were gathered for the evacuation drill. So before the first-class cabin sentries returned, I took the corpse to the refrigeration room. And then on arriving in Dover, you concealed the body in your trunk in order to smuggle it past the border police. I knew I needed to take steps since the police were to be convinced when the body was found in London. In that case, you must have known. You must have had intimate details of Inspector Gregson's intended schedule. Yes, my British counterpart sent me everything I needed to know. The inspector was due at Fresno Street at 5 o'clock that afternoon, in order to meet a man by the name of Hugh Bone, from whom he would take back his police identification. Ah, I decided that man would be the perfect person to set up as the culprit. So I took a hackney carriage over there with the body still in my trunk. That must have been just after we took this photograph with you at the hotel then. Yes, I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. I was more than a little nervous. On Fresno Street, I spotted a young girl selling little firecrackers. Miss Venus, of course. I conceived of a candle trick there and then. So I donned a simple disguise and approached the girl to buy enough firecrackers to replicate a gunshot. What sort of disguise? Well, for some reason, the inspector had a bright red hairpiece on his own traveling case, so I put that on, although I suspect I drew more attention to myself in that than I would have otherwise. The hairpiece we found at the scene, the inspector had it ready for the Red-Headed League investigation. I only arrived at the room around 4:45, so I quickly placed the body on the floor, moved the notice board, and set up my little candle trick. I arranged it so the firecrackers would go off with a bang around 15 minutes later, so that Mr. Bone, who was due to arrive at 5, would walk straight into the trap. Except, at the last moment, I made a careless blunder. What was that? I imagine it was the bag of fish and chips. Ah! I didn't notice that it had fallen out of his overcoat pocket when I moved the body to the refrigeration room. I put it back in his pocket with the following morning, but... well, it seems the warmth of the heated cabin had accelerated the decay of the fish. Anyway, that's everything. All the sordid details of what I did. Bro, the stand is gone. I've heard enough. We've arrived at the truth about the murder of one of the country's most capable and respected police inspectors. The witness will be tried in the coming days. For a crime of such a vile nature, you can expect the most severe penalty. An exchange of assassins. What a foolhardy idea. Mr. Jigoku, one last detail. Who was your counterpart in Britain? Who was the mastermind behind this assassin exchange? Nothing you say now can make matters any worse for you. Just tell us. Enough! I've already told you that I cannot say! Even though, as things stand, you may very well never set foot in your homeland again. What are you waiting for? Can't we get this over with now? It's finished. All of it. I'm finished. Nah, we gotta stop this right now. Then, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I now pronounce the findings of this court. This man before us has admitted to the willful murder of Tobias Gregson. Nah, bro. Shihiro Jigoku, it is the opinion of this court that you should be found guilty. Then may I remind all those present of the strict confidentiality demanded by this closed court. Someone's gonna object. No? Moments ago, Mr. Jigoku signed a written confession admitting to the murder of Inspector Gregson and the subsequent conveyance of the body. In short, the defendant's innocence has therefore been established beyond doubt. Oh, wonderful. Well done, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, thank you. Is something wrong? A lot. I'm just a little troubled by his silence. The true identity of the Reaper of the Bailey, and this extraordinary assassin exchange. We do remain in the dark about these mysteries, however. Insofar as the indictment brought against the defendant in this trial, we have reached a conclusion. I have every intention of pursuing both mysteries. As a prosecutor. As you wish. Now, for the formal adjudication, I hereby declare the defendant, Barak von Zeeks. There he goes. Kazuma is not gonna let it go. He still believes that Barak's the Reaper. The prosecution calls for adjudication to be deferred. Counsel? The accused innocent hasn't been fully established at all. And therefore, it would be wrong to deliver a verdict at this time. That is the prosecution's unwavering position. What? But Judge Jigoku has already confessed. Nevertheless, Barak von Zeeks has committed crimes for which he must be punished. Well, it would appear you have information that the court needs to hear, Prosecutor Ryunosuke. Certainly, the murder of Inspector Grayson was actually carried out by Shihiro Jigoku. But it's clear from the witness's testimony that he was coerced into complying with the plot. Into this sick, merciless assassin exchange. That may be true, but... So what I want to know is, who coerced Jigoku? Who was pulling the strings? The victim went to France having been ordered on a mission for the Reaper, only to be murdered. In other words, the mastermind behind the assassin exchange is someone in a position to give such an order. As we've already established, the Reaper himself. Well, certainly, that would appear to follow. Okay, stop! We need to make a point here. Let's say, for example, if Baron von Zeeks was the Reaper, and he gave Jigoku the orders to put Tobias Gregson at the house on Fresno Street, why the hell would Zeeks put himself there and incriminate himself? That makes no sense at all. There's no logic to that. The prosecution hereby formally accuses the man in the dock, Barak von Zeeks, of being the Reaper of the Bailey, and furthermore, I'm going to prove his guilt beyond all reasonable doubt. What? What? Your Honor, no. But, okay, so, but here's the thing. As stupid as that is, and the fact that that makes absolutely no sense, Strongheart is going to go with it. Because we already suspect, or at least I do anyway, that Strongheart is the other part. It is the Reaper, the one orchestrating this. He will want Zeke's to take the fall. He put him in this position in the first place. This has all been Strongheart's freaking plan from the get-go. He wants Barrick gone. And Kazuma won't be a problem to Strongheart, because Kazuma only cares about getting Barrick von Zeeks, because he personally believes that he's the murderer of his father. That's where we're going here. The Reaper of the Bailey is a long-standing mystery, Council. Are you suggesting you have some new information with which to build a case? Scotland Yard has already investigated Lord Van Zeeks very thoroughly in that regard, and they found no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the claim that he is the Reaper. Perhaps, but circumstances have now changed. What do you mean? It's already been established that the Assassin Exchange was negotiated with Jigoku by the Reaper himself, which means we now have a new line of questioning by which to identify definitively the man's identity. That is the prosecution's intention here. I must say I'm surprised by quite how tenaciously you appear to want to besmirch my name. You are guilty of an unforgivable crime, Lord Van Zeeks. And I will bring you to justice for it. Whatever it takes. That explains Kazuma's silence before. He'll stop at nothing to finish what Lord Van Zeeks unwillingly started 10 years ago. Very well. Well, it's extremely irregular. I will, on this occasion, grant the prosecution further opportunity for witness testimony. The defendant will disclose any and all involvement he has had with the Reaper in the Assassin Exchange. I thank you, my lord, for guiding the court so wisely. I hereby declare this court to be in session for a supplementary hearing. Round 2. Fight. This is insane. But I turn a blind eye to the discourtesy as I verify that this vile and unrelenting accusation has soured the contents of my hallowed chalice. Lord Van Zeeks, word about... I first had to suffer the pseudonym of the Reaper 10 years ago now, and ever since that time I've endured the weight of implied guilt that's gone with it. So I welcome the chance to testify now and crush those allegations once and for all. Good. Then let justice decide, Lord Van Zeeks. The prosecution seeks to begin building its case by calling the accused to the stand as the primary witness, in order that he may answer the accusation brought by the prosecution that he is the Reaper of the Bailey. And what says the defense? Putting the defendant in the witness stand can be extremely dangerous. And Kazuma-sama is so emotional at the moment, he's not thinking logically. You're right, that he's not himself. But I knew it would be like this. And I came here to determine to face him through whatever might arise. As a lawyer and as his friend. Then that's what we must do. The defense has no objection, my lord. Very well. Defendant, you will take the witness stand and give formal testimony on the subject of your involvement with the Reaper and the Assassin Exchange. As you wish, my lord. Bro, and the insanity continues. The Reaper and the Assassin Exchange. I have never taken the life of another, nor have I instructed another to kill. I have been investigating the truth behind the Reaper for years, and I was aware of Gregson's involvement. That's the reason I went to Fresno Street that day, and how I came to discover the body. The point is, no common thread exists between myself, Gregson, and Dr. Wilson. Clearly, therefore, there's no reason to suspect me of being behind the Assassin Exchange. Well, that's not even true, though. So you deny all accusations by the prosecution. Both that you are the Reaper of the Bailey, and that you masterminded the assassin exchange. I acknowledge that the public at large believe me to be the Reaper. However, that is a fallacy which I alone am in a position to forswear. Naturally, the prosecution believes the testimony just given by the accused to be untrue. Ryunosuke Naruhodo? Yes? Let me ask you, why are you here? What really brings you to this courtroom? A desire to uncover the truth. Even if the truth proves your client to be guilty. From all my experiences in this courtroom, I've come to realize something. The truth can't be hidden. Sooner or later, it will come out. Knock first.
Food done.
Thank you. So it's always my intention to work with my client in the pursuit of the truth. I want you to remember what you just said. Enough distillery chatter! Counsel for the defense, proceed to cross-examine the witness. Ah, yes, my lord. I know exactly what you're thinking, Kazuma. I know you're just waiting to point it out. The contradiction you're convinced lies somewhere within the man's testimony. Job for the middle jury.
Hold it!
Go. What are you doing? You didn't even knock. So you're not what the general public refer to as the infamous Reaper of the Bailey. Exactly. Don't imagine for a moment that the court will be satisfied with a one-word answer on this. I realize that. If you're continuing to comment on every sentence, this one could take a while, Kazuma. Didn't you find it disturbing, though, that one by one, defendants who'd been acquitted after your unsuccessful prosecution were killed? Let me answer that question by posing another. If, one by one, defendants who had been acquitted after your successful defense were killed, would you find that disturbing? Disturbing? I couldn't possibly see how that would make me feel with a one-word answer like that. Exactly. Well, that told me. But even if though I am not the Reaper, that doesn't mean I ignored all the hearsay.
Hold it!
You say for years. How long exactly? Since the very first time the Reaper's influence was felt in this courtroom. 10 years ago now. And your investigations led you somehow to Inspector Gregson, you're saying? I didn't want to believe it. He was a personal acquaintance. We worked on cases together in the past. A friend, even. It felt like a betrayal, but I demanded permission to search his office at the odd without his knowledge. Which is when you found his secret notebook, is it? It's when I first learned of the location he noted only as Groose, and the appointment at 5 p.m. on the 31st. Though I did not know the significance of the details at the time. So now we're at the nub of the matter. As it turns out, the significance for me personally was very unfortunate. The Groose is loose.
Hold it!
But why did you go to that specific location? I thought that if it was the Reaper's headquarters, then by turning up there at 5 o'clock, I would catch whoever was involved red-handed. Sadly, all that was waiting for me was the Inspector's corpse. Yes, even though it wasn't designed for you, you walked straight into the trap set by Jigoku. Exactly. Jigoku had intended to implicate Yubone, but unhappily for me, I arrived at the scene first. Ha! A ridiculously careless blunder. Moved on, just throwing insults around, then I see, then Kazuma. Why would you make... Think what you will. It doesn't change the truth. Zip.
Hold it!
There is a link between you and Gregson, though. Of course, we are close acquaintances. We work on numerous cases together. I consider the man to be a mentor of sorts. He taught me a number of important lessons. He did? Such as what? Something silly. Where to buy good fish and chips. And such like. I'd play it. I'd honestly be pretty okay with it. Dr. Wilson was a coroner, of course, but that was some time in the past. In any case, I understand it was several years ago now that he was invited to work at a Japanese university. That's right. He was a visiting professor at the Imperial Yuma University in Tokyo. It should be unambiguously clear, then, that no link exists between myself and him. In other words, I had no motive for sending some assassin across the oceans to kill the man. That sounds plausible enough, and I want to believe it. But something about this just doesn't sit quite right with me.
Hold it!
Certainly as it stands, there's no evidence to suggest that you concocted the scheme.
Objection!
Oh, shut up. But as it stands, we have only the accused's insistence of his innocence. Sorry? Perhaps there is some reason that would explain why he masterminded the assassin exchange. And if a reason could be established later in these proceedings, then the accused claim in his testimony that he wasn't involved would amount to perjury. Well, yes, that's true, but clearly Kazuma-sama intends to identify a reason and use it to make his case. So he's got nothing! So we don't need to think from something first. He'll gain the advantage. This could be dangerous. So basically, we need to point out the inconsistency before he does. Which is stupid. A convincing testimony by Lord Van Zeeks. Certainly, with no apparent connection between the three men, there's no way to establish a motive. The testimony seems unassailable as far as I can see. Oh dear me, what a bleak expression. I agree, there doesn't appear to be any particular link between them, at first glance. But with the inclusion of one other person... I must be overthinking it, surely. Another person, Mr. Naruhodo. I need to think back over all the information we've gained so far. Alright, and I'll review my notes about the case and all the evidence in the court record. Could it be that Lord Van Zeeks has something to hide after all? Well, of course he has, even if it's unintentional. There's no common thread. What do we have? Well, let's save. I'm pretty sure it's that. There it is. What is this? An autopsy report? Wait, this is 10 years old. From the autopsy of Lord Clint Van Zeeks. What? My brother's autopsy report? I'm pleased to see the defense doesn't intend to run from the undeniable truth. Order in the court! What reason do you have for presenting a 10-year-old autopsy report here, counsel? The autopsy report of the professor's final victim is an undeniable link between Inspector Gregson, Dr. Wilson, and the defendant. Not that accursed name again, the professor. I've personally researched all of the court records relating to that case. I know that at the time, autopsy was considered a sacrilege to the victim's souls, and for a member of the aristocracy like Lord Clint Van Zeeks, it was unthinkable. But someone implored the powers to be to allow the autopsy to go ahead, Inspector Gregson. He declared that he was certain that he would obtain conclusive proof from the procedure. And it was Dr. Wilson who conducted the autopsy. His signature is clearly visible in the document. As promised by Gregson, the autopsy did indeed produce evidence. The evidence that conclusively proved Ryunosuke was guilty of the murders. In my brother's dying moments, he mustered all his remaining strength to leave that vital clue behind. Indeed, that was the key to indicating indicting the professor for his crimes and the conclusive evidence that convicted him. It enabled Lord Van Ziegster to avenge his brother's senseless death with a marvelous victory in court. A marvelous victory, was it? I wonder if that's really true. But could the same be said if it turned out that the key piece of evidence in question was in fact fabricated? If the inspector, the coroner, and the prosecutor all concluded together to cast an innocent Japanese man as a mass murderer to send him to his death. That's outrageous! And now, 10 years later, for some reason, the secret has been threatened and needs protecting. Which is why the inspector and the coroner had to be silenced, isn't it? By someone in power in Japan and in Britain using two killers recruited for the assassin exchange. Order at once! 10 years ago, my father was convicted in this very courtroom as a mass murderer to be sentenced to death. But it was all a sham, and I swore to myself I'd prove it, which is why I had to come to Britain. Whatever the cost! Oh man, you'll have to forgive me if I feel compelled to toast this vengeful Nipponese's tenacity of purpose here. However, he who failed to squash his emotions in the courtroom has failed as a lawyer. Come on, Kazuma, you know this won't wash. You're claiming your father was misrepresented in a trial that took place a whole decade ago. You must see that without evidence, that's nothing more than a wild accusation. As it happens, I have evidence. What? As the court has heard, I crossed the channel to France with Gregson on the 31st. I went with him with the pretext of being the assassin recruited to kill Shizuru Jigoku, but my true intentions were to make the inspector tell me the truth. What truth? The truth about the evidence, and he acknowledged what I'd already deduced. There's a closely guarded secret about what went on in that autopsy 10 years ago. What? A secret? I know nothing of any secret! While we waited for my supposed mark in Jigoku's cabin, I drew my clan's illustrious sword, Karuma, before the inspector's eyes. He very quickly understood what my true motive was. Oh boy. Right, I see. You're that Asogius young lad, are you? And what? You're gonna cut me down with that thing, is that it? That will very much depend on the answers you give to my questions. I want to know what really happened 10 years ago. The truth. That's all. Before we get into it, let me make one thing clear. I still believe your father was the professor. There's no doubt in my mind. But unfortunately, back then, we didn't have the evidence we needed to make the crime stick. So, you admit it then. The evidence used in my father's trial was fabricated. It was for the good of the country. Anyway, I was just following orders. Orders? What exactly did you do? Speak! I'm not saying another word. Even if your life depends on it. That's right. Even then. So that's when the tip of the sword broke. Oh, Kazuma-sama. If the results of Clint Van Zeek's autopsy were fabricated, then the investigating officer Gregson and the lead coroner Wilson must have known about it. And if they can only have been ordered to pervert the course of justice in that way by one man, the man leading the case for the prosecution, Barrack von Zeeks. In other words, the defendant did have cause to organize this exchange of assassins. Okay, but are we forgetting the fact that the original prosecutor for that case was Strongheart, and he gave the case to Zeeks? He gave the case to Varric. To Barrick. Strongheart, if there was fabricated evidence, he probably had it prepared ahead of time. Exactly. And as was established earlier, it has to have been the Reaper himself who liaised with Jigoku in Japan to arrange the exchange. So it follows that the Reaper's true identity can only be that of the man who stands accused in this courtroom today, Barrick von Zeeks. And of course Strongheart will be more than eager to throw the book at Barrick.
Objection.
Kazuma Sogi. What? What you've just told the court? Are you absolutely certain of your facts? Did Gregson really fabricate evidence for that trial 10 years ago? I heard it with my own ears. His shameful admission. In that case, I know. The name is the Reaper. What? Lord Van Zeeks? I gave no such orders. I knows that for certain. Which narrows down the remaining possibilities to one. If Lord Van Zeeks isn't the one behind all this, then yes, there is only one other person who could have done something like that. I believe I know who it is too. You! I just had a feeling that his name was gonna come up. The true identity of the infamous Reaper the Bailey is Male Strongheart. The only person who could have arranged the assassin exchange and manipulated the autopsy results is the Lord Chief Justice himself, Lord Male Strongheart. What? Lord Strongheart? Yes, it's true that 10 years ago the defendant handled the prosecution of the professor in court, but he only took over the case after his brother Lord Van Zeeks had been killed. Oh, I can only assume that this is the most inappropriate joke in the British judicial history. Well, Lord Van Zeeks, 10 years ago, I was very new to my profession, but I had a burning desire to avenge my brother's death, so I pleaded for control of the case. The investigation to that point, the supplication of the lords to allow my brother's corpse to be examined, all the evidence I was given, the autopsy reports, it all came from you. I've spent my life believing that I was in your debt for the way you stood aside and let me handle the trial, but I see now I was very much mistaken. It was a hugely influential force that caused the inspector and the coroner to break the law 10 years ago, and that same force was still felt a decade later on the other side of the world by Shishiro Jigoku. Lord Strongheart, everything falls into place when we recognize that you are the Reaper of the Bailey. How are you supposed to take down the judge himself? The court awaits your response, my lord. This may very well go down in British judicial history, but I assure you it is no joke. Consider this a formal accusal by the defense. It doesn't warrant a response. A formal accusal? Don't be absurd. The defense's claims are utter nonsense and wild fantasy at best. You're not going to defend yourself. You claim there was some wrongdoing with Lord Clint Van Zeeks' autopsy. That's utterly untrue.
Objection.
But I heard it from Gregson's own lips. He admitted to it. And where's your evidence? What? Gregson's dead now. Unless you were thinking of summoning a ghost to the stand. That's another series. You mean to say, if I forget how the system works in your little backwater country, But in the courts of the British Empire, without evidence, there is no case. I have no intention of entertaining some wild fantasy that can't possibly be substantiated by anyone or anything. Ah! Your Jordans have no relevance here, fly as they may be. Order! Order in the court! Following Inspector Grayson's murder, and in the light of Dr. Wilson's death as well, there's really no one left who could testify about the events of 10 years ago, is there? So that was the real purpose of the accession exchange. This court has no business raking over the coals of a case that was concluded a decade ago. The accusal brought by the prosecution and the defense is categorically denied. I take it there are no objections? Kazuma, he's more or less waited his whole life for this moment. Is there really nothing else we can do now? Is there no other avenue we can go down in pursuit of the truth of what happened all those years ago? If only there was someone who could testify about Clint Van Zeek's autopsy. There's someone, I think. Wait, hold on. I need to look over this. I mean, I know there is someone, but I need to know who it is first. Alright, wait! Okay, this could be it. It's signed by Dr. Wilson, who carried out the procedure, though Professor Mikitoba pinned the report. So Mikitoba is the one who has pinned this report. He wrote it, which means he was there and present. I have to bank on that. The only other possibility of anyone that was from there that was still alive, that's still alive and accessible, is Sherlock Sholmes. It's either Sherlock Sholmes or it's Miss Mikitoba. But Mikitoba has evidence to back up that claim. I don't have anything for Sholmes. Sholmes knew everyone involved, but, you know, to some degree, but so did Mikitoba. There is someone. He's gone to extraordinary lengths to cover his tracks, even so far as dispatching an assassin all the way to Japan to ensure Dr. Wilson's silence. And Dr. Sith won't say anything against Strongheart. But there's still one ray of hope. Everyone's on pins and needles. Actually, there is one person. One person who could still testify about that autopsy. Don't be ridiculous. There's no one left. Who, Ryunosuke? Who? Tell me! Kazuma, Please! This trial can't end! Not yet! Yo mama. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the truth. The person the defense would like to call to the stand to testify about the autopsy of Lord Clint Van Zeeks is... Mikitoba. Heaven help us, another Japanese! An expert in forensic medicine, my lord, Professor Eugen Mikitoba. 16 years ago, he came to London with Chihiro Jigoku and Genshin Asogi as a visiting student. And what could his testimony possibly tell us? Professor Mikitoba was the primary assistant during the autopsy in question. He was also the person who actually pinned the report. Incorrect! The autopsy was carried out by the coroner, Dr. Wilson. The report carries his signature. It was the primary assistant's duty to keep a written record of the coroner's work during the procedure. In actual fact, the coroner merely read over the report at the end and signed it. In other words, Professor Mikitoba witnessed the entire autopsy from start to finish. The defense demands that Professor Mikitoba be summoned here as a witness as a matter of urgency. Whatever really happened in that autopsy laboratory 10 years ago is something only he can tell us. He won't do it. The defense's demand is denied. What? But Professor Mikitoba is in London at this very moment. We can summon him to the stand in minutes. No, of course he's not going to agree to it. Strongheart has no intention of summoning anyone who knows. He's too concerned about protecting himself. Prosecutor Asogi, let me refresh your memory, as you seem to have forgotten the prosecution's stance. Only minutes ago, you accused the defendant of being the Reaper and of masterminding the assassin exchange. I did, yes. So present your evidence for those claims and make your case complete. At this time, I don't have the requested evidence, but that's exactly why we need witness testimony. The Professor case is closed. There are no clues in the distant past that will bolster your argument today. I'm afraid to say, Prosecutor Ryunosuke, that you would appear to be possessed by the spirit of your late homicidal father. Dude, what disrespect. Now, as I stated earlier, this court has already reached a conclusion with respect to the matter at hand. Inspector Grayson was murdered by Japanese Supreme Court Judge Shihiro Jigoku. For as for any hidden circumstances that may exist, they will be investigated in due course by the proper authorities. We all know what will happen. That'll just give the mastermind this whole venture time to cover his tracks again. By which you mean me? Your punishment for this contemptible behavior will be decided at a later date. As for you, Prosecutor Ryunosuke, you will be remanded the following these proceedings. Willingly, I trust, since you gave your word. Ugh! This futile game of revenge is over, young Master Ryunosuke. Ugh. Ah! I am not screaming that long. Dude. That will be all! I hereby declare this trial to be over! Court is... Yo, it's the boy! Mr. Sholmes? This is no place for amateur detection, Mr. Sholmes. May I remind you that these proceedings are closed to the general public. You will leave the courtroom at once! Mr. Sholmes was instrumental in the apprehension of Shihiro Jigoku before he fled from Europe. The court should hear what he has to say. Lord Mail Strongheart, it's imperative that you refrain from bringing this trial to an end at this stage. Is it really? And why would that be? You need only recall your own words from the opening of this trial to answer that question, if I may. We will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Surely it can't be that the shock of being accused of being the Reaper yourself has erased that from your memory, can it? The whole truth, sir, has already been uncovered! It would seem that we have a great many important members of the judiciary present here today. I put it to you, my dear fellows, should the trial end at this juncture? After all, why have you been invited to attend? To nod along to the perversities of your superiors? That's the first time I've heard them muddle this whole time. Order! Order in the court! It seems to me that we stand before a door that leads to a new era of legal practices. A door that is ajar. Let us emerge from the shadows of the Reaper's decade-long ascendancy. For you and you alone, my dear fellows, have the power to push this door open now. The auditors of the gallery have no right to express an opinion on court proceedings. Silence! He's right. The judge has absolute authority here. Yes, if he calls the trial to an end, it must end. I sense dark things occurring behind the scenes. Dark things indeed. Is there a single person here present who can honestly say he doesn't feel the same? What's... The trial should go on. Summon the witness. That's right. We need to clear this up before that young Japanese fellow has remained in custody. My lord, you have secured those present that you would uncover the whole truth. Assure those you uncover the whole present. Vindicate yourself on this outlandish accusation. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's the very foundation of British law. A toast to my dependable colleagues in the gallery. Yo, they're chanting. Well, my lord, you hear the voice of the British Justice, I take it? I think you'll find it to be rather awkward silence. The court will recess briefly. I have no intention of shrinking from these allegations. Bailiff, arrange for the subpoena of the witness at once. As soon as the gentleman arrives in the courthouse, we shall reconvene. They were shouting, testify. A recess won't be necessary, my lord. Pardon? Mikitoba is a close friend of mine. He accompanied me today and is waiting in the antechamber as we speak. I do believe he's been enjoying a little trip down memory lane, in fact. What? Professor Mikitoba is here in the courthouse? Mr. Sholmes, you didn't know this would happen, did you? My dear fellow, no one is in a better position to answer that question than you, surely. I wasn't just asking for the fun of it, you know. Well, I must thank you for your assistance in this matter, Mr. Sholmes. However, you are of no further use here. Kindly leave the courtroom at once. But of course, in truth, I find myself rather busy now as of the result of these developments. Mr. Naruhodo? Yes. I trust you have Iris's little lucky charm with you. Absolutely. It's still in my pocket. She sends her regards, and a reminder. Find yourself at a dead end, the years are at your disposal. Just one tug, if you please. Oh, of course. In that case, the trial will continue without delay. Bailiff, show the witness to the stand. So it's Lord Strongheart. He's the Reaper of the Bailey. Where exactly is the trial going to take me, I wonder? Just how deep am I about to be plunged into the blackness of the abyss? Well, I'm ready. I'm ready to head into the heart of this maelstrom and confront whatever horrors it tries to drown me under. Bro, that's... And we're not done! We have one more section to go. I mean, granted, this was only about 2 hours, but still. How do people go through this section in 1 hour? What are you, speedrunning the game? Whoa. The music is finally tuned down a little bit. The three of them. Oh, goodness. My throat is killing me. So, witness, please state your name and occupation for the court. Yujin Mikitoba, lecturer in forensic medicine at the Imperial Yuma University in Tokyo, Japan. And Professor Mikitoba, the young lady beside you is... Ah! This is Dr. Mariah Gorey. Scotland Yard's practicing coroner, the daughter of Dr. Sith, I understand. Yes, Dr. Sith. I'm afraid I can't tell you why she's here. She just appeared. You summoned this strange Japanese man as a witness to that autopsy. But you don't summon Mama. That makes no sense. She was there too. That's about the size of it. I've had her eyes boring into the side of my cheek constantly while I was in the antechamber too. Poor man. The idea of it's making me shudder. Revelations about Dr. Sith that came to light some days ago defiled the reputation of the entire judiciary. She was therefore deemed unfit to appear as a witness in today's proceedings. The Ministry of Justice's decision on that is final. Well, we wouldn't want any more perjury to be committed, would we? The Ministry of Justice. Some questionable strings are being pulled, I think. I remember you, Dr. Mikitoba. But I certainly never expected to be meeting you under these circumstances. Yes, it's been a long while, Lord Strongheart. The prosecution understands that you were a visiting student of forensic science in London until 10 years ago. That's right. I studied under Dr. Wilson at St. Sinners. So you were present at the autopsy of my brother, Lord Clint Van Zeeks. I was, yes. I assisted Dr. Wilson with the entire procedure. Mama's far more skilled than any Japanese man. Well, Dr. Wilson asked me to be his primary assistant on that occasion. And this autopsy report was actually penned by you, I believe. Yes, I noted all of the doctor's findings, and when we were done, he read through the document and signed it. Poor Mama. As secondary assistant, she wouldn't have had such a good view of all the innards. So, Professor, do you remember Inspector Gregson? Yes, of course. If it wasn't for his insistence, Lord Van Zeek's autopsy would never have happened. But he was absolutely convinced that it would reveal decisive evidence against Genshin, you see. So Lord Strongheart had to entreat the nobility to allow it to take place. Do correct me if I'm wrong, my lord. It was a result of that autopsy that a mass murderer was apprehended and justice was done. But Gregson admitted it before he was killed. He admitted that the results of the autopsy were fabricated. You were there at the time, so you must testify. You have an obligation to tell the truth about what really went on. Absolutely. That's precisely why I'm here. And that's why I'm here too. Very well then. You will give your formal testimony now, witness. But before you begin, a word of warning. Oh. You will state truthfully and accurately what you saw and what you heard at the time. I wouldn't dream of doing otherwise, my lord. The moment your testimony verges on supposition, I will expel you from my courtroom. Remember that. Bro. He's trying to do everything he can. The moment when the villain is the judge. From my own observations, I couldn't say there was any indication of the autopsy results having been fabricated. Death resulted from a wound made by a Western-style sword, transfixing the heart. I found that a little strange. There were no other signs of internal injury. Nothing questionable at all. It was just that beautiful but dangerous piece of evidence removed from the man's stomach. Presumed to have been swallowed by the victim as a way of posthumously identifying his assailant. Wait, what? No indication. Nothing to suggest fabrication. Professor Kotoba, are you certain about that? Well, nothing that I could positively identify as such, much less swear to in testimony. Ugh! Well, that clears things up nicely. The only fabrication here, Asogi, has come from you. What? You claim the inspector confessed just before his death, but that is a fabrication. No, he freely acknowledged it. I swear he did. Freely, with the tip of a sword at his throat. The man clearly was at his wit's end. Again, ass laugh as evidence. The court will give no credence to this confession that was uttered in obvious desperation. Quite simply, there was nothing questionable about the investigation of Lord Clint Van Zeek's death. And with this testimony we have, without question, uncovered the whole truth of the matter. If I may, my lord, there was most certainly something questionable about it, and the whole truth does rather elude us, I feel. I beg your pardon. Well, you're obviously aware of the facts of the case. All 4 of the professor's previous victims died when an enormous beast was set upon them that ripped out their throats. That's right, the Baskerville's hound. Oh, such horrifying crimes. But curiously, the killer's last victim, Lord Clint Van Zeek's, suffered a different fate. Yes, you're right. He was stabbed through the heart with a sword. That's enough. I believe I warned you about this, witness. I promise to curtail your testimony as soon as it entered the realms of supposition or speculation. Very well, my lord. In that case, the defense will pursue a conclusion to this during the cross-examination. What? I have the right to cross-examine every witness after testimony. And I fully intend to exercise that right. Ryunosuke, I'm afraid that even the presiding judge has no authority to contravene the letter of the law. As I'm sure every member of the judiciary present in the gallery would agree. Ha! Very well. You may begin, counsel, if you dare. However, the moment your argument strays from the established facts, I will not hesitate to bring the cross-examination to an end. Proceed with caution. Examine these nuts. Okie day. Dude, why are you even staring down freaking Kazuo at this point? He's not even the villain. Okay. You couldn't say. No, sadly not. But then you couldn't say there wasn't any indication either, could you? No, true, I couldn't. I was at Dr. Wilson's side as he performed the procedure, recording what he did. But at times, of course, he instructed me to fetch implements and such like. Whilst I was away from the operating table, obviously I could have missed something. And at those times, what was the secondary assistant doing? Following this Japanese man's orders to adjust the lighting or pass him the implements. But that doesn't mean Mama wasn't a vital part of the team. Quite, yes. So, would you totally refrain from staring at my cheeks like that? Professor Megatoba, think! Was there nothing at all that seemed out of place to you? Well, yes, there was, as a matter of fact. In all of the previous 4 killings attributed to the Professor, the victims were killed by an enormous dog, I believe. Their throats were, well, mauled. Correct. And yet Lord Van Zeeks was stabbed. Ah, do you mean to say you think Lord Clint Van Zeeks may not have been one of the Professor's victims? There is no basis on which to doubt the findings of the investigations carried out at the time. But Genshin Isogi confessed to all his crimes upon his arrest. He admitted to having taken the lives of all 5 members of the aristocracy. Oh! Yet the beast was used to carry out the killings was never identified. No evidence was found to suggest that Genshin had ever kept a dog. A true hound of hell. There were no other signs of internal injury, nothing questionable at all. Why are we talking to you anyway? But, you weren't actually present at the autopsy yourself, were you, Dr. Gory? Does that matter? Yes! Well, I just wonder how useful your testimony could be in that case, really. I mean, it would be different if your mother, Dr. Sith, were in the stand, but I've read all the paperwork about the case, and Mama's told me the story countless times. The statement I just made is exactly what's written in the autopsy report. I did confirm that myself at the time, it's true. Besides the stab wound, there were no other signs of internal trauma. I see. Mama told me all about it. Oh? She said there was nothing of note internally. But they did find an amazing piece of evidence. Something unbelievable. Unbelievable? Well, what do you mean? Come on, Dr. Gory, what was it? Okay, well tell us what it is. What exactly was it, though? What does beautiful but dangerous mean? Well, it was sparkly and round, with a hole. As if it might slip over a finger, perhaps. What? It was a ring, belonging to Genshin Isogi. My father's ring was inside the victim's stomach! At the time, Genshin wore a large ring on the deciduous quarters of his left hand, the fourth, or ring finger. I understood it was some sort of keepsake. Probably. When my father left Japan for London 16 years ago, I was 8 years old, but I remember that ring. You do? My father's possessions were sent to our family home in Japan after his death, but the ring wasn't among them. Obviously not. It was a key piece of evidence. It remains under lock and key at the stores at Scotland Yard to this day. After the autopsy, Genshin was summoned by the police to check for the presence of the ring. It wasn't on his hand, of course. Moreover, there were deep abrasions on his finger where it had been pulled off. They arrested the man there and then, right before my eyes. How could they? I brought the ring along with me today. What? Here it is. It's a bit dusty from years in the stores. Good gracious, yes, that's it! I haven't seen that in 10 long years. And that was found inside the victim's stomach. Yes, I'm afraid so. You hesitated there, Professor Makatoba. Should we read something into that? Well, it's just thinking back now. I didn't actually witness the moment it was extracted from the victim's body. Oh my, really? At that precise moment, Dr. Wilson had asked me to fetch him a new scalpel, you see. Dr. Gorey, the removal of historic evidence from the stores requires my consent, does it not? Hide behind the mask. That's what the point of the mask is. However it came to be here, the court cannot deny that this is crucial evidence for today's proceedings. Very well, you may submit it. During autopsy, claws grasping the gem look sharp enough to cause a very nasty scratch. It's not the sort of ring normally seen in Japan. They almost look like claws protecting that jewel. We must examine it very carefully, Mr. Naruhodo. Very carefully indeed. Well, let's do it now. These fat claws are doing a good job of protecting the equally fat gemstone in the middle of this ring. Yes, if you were clumsy, you could give yourself a rather nasty cut on them, I should think. Ow! Now my finger's bleeding! The claws really are sharp. Oh my, that was very quick clumsiness, Mr. Naruhodo, even for you. Who would make such a dangerous ring? You couldn't swallow it without doing yourself some fairly serious damage, surely. Sticky Monchi Bun at that side would go down much better, with some red bean paste in the middle. Someone as clumsy as me would probably manage to choke on it somehow. Okay, well... Presumed. And that was the decisive piece of evidence that led to Genshin Asogi's arrest. Correct. After further investigation by Scotland Yard, the man admitted to his crimes. That's a lie! My father was no killer! Barak von Zeeks, it was you! You twisted the truth to suit your purposes! Your hatred of me doesn't change the facts that were established 10 years ago. My brother Clint had closed in on the professor. In the end, he exposed the man and put a stop to his illegal rampage. In the way only a man of my brother's caliber could. That's everything, is it? Poor father. He looks so troubled. Perhaps it's because 10 years ago, something happened that's been weighing on his mind. Oh? I couldn't say, were his words. That phrasing was very deliberate, I'm sure. I wonder if he's had his suspicions all these years. If that's the case, we need to use this cross-examination to prove what really happened, and remove any trace of doubt. If we could establish that Kazuma-sama's claim of fabricated evidence was true, we can't shy away from this now. Even if what we might uncover could lead to a total calamity. Don't worry, Mr. Naruhodo. I'll be right beside you. Whatever may happen. Okay, so let's see. Do I have the autopsy report? Scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. So what does that mean? Okay, if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't a stab to the heart instantly kill you? Well, I'm gonna go with... There's a couple of points here I want to attack. Okay, so we found... Okay, so the evidence that was retrieved from the autopsy, Sora, was Genshin Isogi's ring. True, but would you have the time, after being stabbed in the heart, to be able to pull off your duelist ring that closely put on there and manage to swallow it before you died? Like, that's what I'm thinking. That doesn't make any sense. Plus, how would you be able to swallow it without any signs of internal... This is it. There's no sign of internal injury. I'm gonna present it on here. Okay, that's not... Never mind. Let me look at a different thing. It's either the report or the ring. Okay. There we go. Well, I knew it was one of those two. The court has heard that the ring was extracted from the victim's stomach. But you didn't actually see it being removed, did you, Professor Mikotoba? That's right. As I said in my testimony before, at that moment I was fetching a replacement scalpel that Dr. Wilson had requested. In other words, you can neither confirm nor deny whether this ring, in fact, really came from the victim's stomach or not. What are you suggesting, counsel? That the ring was never in the victim's stomach to begin with. It's entirely feasible Dr. Wilson fabricated that detail about the autopsy. What are you saying? That Dr. Wilson was in possession of the ring in advance, after it was somehow stolen from Mr. Isogi. And he produced it during the procedure, pretending to have found it there and then in the victim's stomach.
Objection!
Supposition at best. What possible evidence do you have to support such a rash claim? This evidence, right here. That's the autopsy report. See, there we go. That's what I was thinking. It's explicit in that report, counsel. Other than the ring, nothing unusual was noted internally, so I'm not sure how you intend to prove your point. You've already done it for me, my lord. The lack of internal injury says it all. What? To swallow a ring of this size would require considerable effort and determination. And in addition to its size, there are sharp claws around the gemstone to contend with. My brother was a determined man, and on the brink of death even more so, I'm sure. He would have stopped at nothing to ensure that this evil killer was brought to justice. But if he really had swallowed that enormous ring, it's inconceivable that no traces of its passage down his throat would have remained as internal trauma. No! And there you have arrived at the sticking point. That's precisely why I had my doubts in about the findings myself 10 years ago. Then why didn't you say something at the time? I did. I still remember the conversation I had with Dr. Wilson in the laboratory that day. Look at this! Now, this is a very curious thing to find in a man's stomach, wouldn't you say? But isn't that rather peculiar, Dr. Wilson? What is it now, Mikotoba? Well, if he swallowed a ring of that size, with those sharp metal claws that it has, surely you expect to see damage to the throat and esophagus, torn mucus and brains at the very least. Dr. Mikotoba, may I remind you that I have vastly more experience than you. I'm terribly sorry. I can think of plenty of ways to explain why no injuries could be seen. No, let's say this. The victim would appear to have ingested the item as evidence to identify his assailant. Go ahead, write it down. So I was right. Dr. Wilson deliberately fabricated the results of the autopsy to implicate my father. I'm disappointed, Counsel. That argument is nothing more than speculation. What? Dr. Wilson was Britain's leading authority on forensic science and autopsy report. There is no scientific basis on which to doubt the man's expert opinion. Pardon the interruption, my lord, but damage to the mucous membranes of the throat is easily identified even in living subjects. Using a device called endoscope recently demonstrated in practical use in France. I want one. The government could pay. I don't think so, and Dr. Gorey, rest assured that your removal of evidence from the stores without permission will not go unpunished. We open up the dead to find the truth. I beg your pardon. But Mama, she chose to stitch her corpses up, with all her secrets inside. That's wrong. Dr. Gorey? It's looking as though she's chosen to walk a different path to her mama. The silence that accompanies that. Yes, the ring. What about the ring? I've just remembered something. An earlier incident. What incident? The one I recounted to you before, about the memory I have. Of Ryunosuke saving my life. What? My father saved your life? It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us! All our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Bang! Why did I read the bang? The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. On his left hand, that's where the ring finger was. It was on the ring finger of his left hand that he used to wear that ring. Are you saying? I've always believed those thugs were after me. But now I'm starting to question if perhaps I wasn't the intended target after all. What? Wait, but... Genshin was arrested 2 days after that attack. And in that short interval, the decisive evidence needed to indict him was miraculously found. You mean the ring was stolen from him? You think that was what those thugs were after that night?
Objection.
Dude, he's upset. You pathetic coward. You expect me to believe that you weren't involved? What do you mean by that? It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who took it. You stole my father's ring. You set the whole thing up so you could paint him as a mass murderer and have him arrested. Kazuma, open your eyes. Ryunosuke, you must know deep down. The truth can be completely obscured even when your judgment is only slightly clouded. But at the moment, you seem to be floundering through a dense fog. Is that why you were so insistent I should be present in this trial? To see you like this? Well, this is an amusing spectacle. What a grandiose expression on your face, as if you were Lady Justice herself. It seems you've thoroughly convinced yourself of this alleged fabrication of the autopsy results. So much so that you've apparently blinded the blatant contradiction that would be born out of it. What? Though it's extremely hard to believe, let us imagine that there was some misconduct during the autopsy. If that were the case, why would Asogi not have disputed the findings in his trial? Oh, good point. In the closed court hearing 10 years ago, the defendant never once denied the claims against him. Isn't that right, Lord Van Zeeks? Yes, that is indeed correct. Upon hearing the verdict of guilty, he merely closed his eyes, quietly accepting the judgment. The actions of a man who has accepted responsibility for his deeds and is resigned to his fate. But then... Oh my, then that is very strange. If Mr. Asogi did nothing to oppose the charges against him, then that would surely mean there was no fabricated evidence. An obvious conclusion at which you should have arrived many minutes ago, Prosecutor Asogi. Your twisted loyalty and clouded judgment are hampering your ability for logical thought. Genshin Asogi's silence at his hearing can mean only one thing. There was no fabrication of evidence during the autopsy of his final victim 10 years ago. Oh no, but if that autopsy was all above the board, there will be nothing to stop Lord Strongheart bringing this trial to an immediate conclusion.
Objection.
Wait, who was that? Oh, that was Tazuma, I think. Thank you, Ryunosuke. If it weren't for your frank words just now, this trial may very well have ended prematurely. Kazuma? What's this latest absurdity, Counsel? My lord, your reasoning is perfectly sound. But for one giant hole, I beg your pardon. He's talking about a hole. You claim my father's silence was due to the fact that there was no fabricated evidence. But there's another possible explanation. You overlooked the possibility that he had a reason for maintaining that silence.
Objection.
Silence that would lead him to being convicted and sent to his death? If the autopsy results were an invention, there's no conceivable reason why the man wouldn't have protested. What is that pose?
Objection.
Oh, those results were an invention, all right. There's no question of that. Or are you forgetting that two people came to it with a connection to that autopsy have been assassinated? And if I force the grievances I feel from my mind, I start to see you in a very different light. I think perhaps it's you who's been living in delusion these 10 years. Me? Kazuma-sama has created one last chance for us here, Mr. Naruhodo. We can only show that there was a reason for his father's silence in the trial. A reason why the man would have said nothing even though he was innocent. Could it have been part of some negotiation, perhaps? Enough rhetoric! The court must be shown evidence. What proof do you have that could possibly explain Asogi's silence in court? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi that Mr. Vigil claims disappeared after the convict's execution. Apparently, Mr. Asogi described it as the only weapon I have left.
Take that.
This is the defense's answer to that question. Oh, this is wrong. As I indicated before, my patience for rhetoric is growing thin. You could have at least accompanied that penalty with an explanation of why the answer was wrong. Kazuma-sama probably knew that the evidence being used to convict him was fabricated. Why would he have said nothing in his trial? If it were me, I'd have protested my innocence until I was blue in the face. So if we're right about the autopsy results, there must have been a strong reason for his silence. Well then, perhaps he was saying nothing in exchange for some sort of clemency. That could be it. The defense would like to... Enough rhetoric! God, that hurts my throat. Okay, so if it's not the... I guess I was doing a logic leap that I expected to happen. Let's see. There was a planned escape. I forgot. He was never executed. I completely forgot about that.
Take that!
It's true that Genshin Asogi's silence during his trial resulted in his conviction. But that didn't actually lead to his execution. On the contrary, it led to his escape. Escape that was only possible because he'd been sentenced to death. Although I find it hard to believe my father would have negotiated in that way, the defense is correct. A fake execution, falsification of a death certificate, and a jailbreak inside of a coffin. Clearly, such an elaborate plan couldn't have been carried out by my father alone. He must have had the help of a collaborator from the judiciary. I have here the dismissal notice of the chief warder who was working in the prison at the time. The notes read, there are indications that the jailbreak was in planning prior to the inmate's incarceration. In other words, there were suggestions of some sort of negotiation between Mr. Asogi and the British government. In exchange for his silence in court, he was given an assurance that he would be broken out of prison. Yes, with that sort of clandestine agreement in place, I can imagine he would have kept very quiet. I would go further than that, in fact. I would say the elaborate jailbreak Mr. Asogi explained in no other way. True. Order! Order! First fabricated evidence, and now a jailbreak conspiracy? Of course, because it's all intimately linked. The prosecution wishes to summon a new witness to the stand. Witnesses? People who can testify about the jailbreak that took place 10 years ago. Ah! Governor Caden and the poor chief warder of the prison. I won't allow this trial to turn into a farce to summon the governor of prison after all these years. Oh, wouldn't be any trouble, my lord. What? Father? My dear friend may appear a little rattle-paddled at times, but I can assure you, he is extremely thorough. He wired both Barclay and the local prison earlier, asking Governor Caden and Mr. Vigil to attend the Old Bailey as a matter of extreme urgency. Mr. Sholmes did that? Are you telling me that? Both men are, unless I'm much mistaken. Waiting just outside the courtroom at this very moment. Dude! My lord, you must permit this trial to proceed as you declared at its outset. You promised that we would stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Very well, bring in the witnesses. Make no mistake, I too would like nothing more than to lay this business to rest once and for all. No, nothing has changed. We're trying to prove that it's freaking Strongheart. Nothing has changed in that regard. Zeke is still here, hanging out, having a good time. Would the new witnesses state their names and occupations for the court, please? 1 second, please. My throat needed a rest. Oh, it's so hot in this chair. I, Barricade, Governor of Berkeley Prison. Everyone calls me gossip. I shall jot the little tidbits faster. Your other persona, if you don't mind. Oh, I do beg your pardon. Of course. Sorry. I didn't think I was going to be doing this voice again. My name is Daily Vigil. I used to be the chief warder at Barclay Prison. The reason you've been summoned here to court today is to testify about the jailbreak of the so-called professor 10 years ago. Lost, you professor! We've already been through this before, a decade ago. And the conclusion was that there was nothing untoward happened. A convict escaped from your prison, Governor. Hardly what you call nothing untoward. Yeah, well. The convict's death certificate was somehow falsified after he was allegedly executed, and he escaped the prison inside his own coffin. A plan of that complexity could never have been carried out without the help of somebody of influence inside the prison. Governor Caden, I don't imagine the passage of time will afford you any protection. If it turns out that you were involved in the plot to break out Mr. Asogi of your prison, then of course, the consequences will be very serious. In all likelihood, a capital punishment. Kids, hold on there already. All I did was... Witness, Governor Caden. Aye, sir. You have a critical role to play in public safety of our country. A great responsibility to shoulder. The significance of your testimony in court cannot be understated. Therefore, think carefully before you speak. And Prosecutor Asogi, if you threaten the witness again, you will be held in contempt of court. My apologies, my lord. There's no disputing the fact that an intricate jailbreak plot was enacted 10 years ago. Clearly, you were both involved in some way. So you will testify to the court now and explain exactly what took place. Very well. Let the witnesses give their formal testimony. Tell the court everything you know of the plot to break Asogi out of Barclay 10 years ago. This is the case that just goes on and on, man. The jailbreak plot. It was the day that Japanese jock was found guilty. The detective came for the prosecutor's office. They assigned the convict to the chief warder vigil here and put a plan into action behind the scenes. I was responsible for Asogi right up until the night of his execution, but I knew nothing of any plot. I didn't ken if there were some negotiations between the convict and the prosecutor's office. All I did was carry out my duty for Her Majesty's Great British Empire. A directive from the prosecutor's office. Are you saying that the jailbreak was... Are you saying that was the jailbreak plot? Aye, that's right. Who sent it? Who authorized that plan? I didn't ken that. Are you saying you don't know? Listen, there was an thing about the professor case that was unusual in some way. I didn't ask any questions. I just did what I was told to do. More than that, I cannot tell you. I see. But if the jailbreak plan originated from the prosecutor's office, then one thing is very clear. As suspected, there were clandestine dealings going on between Mr. Asogi and that office. The jailbreak was promised in exchange for Mr. Asogi admitting to the crimes he didn't commit. Well, it's the accent. I just can't do the voice and the accent at the same time. Sorry. That counts as nothing more than speculation on your part. So let me ask the defense. Oh, yes, my lord. I fail to see how these witnesses have any more permanent information here. Do you intend to assert your right to cross-examine? Absolutely. I have no intention of squandering a single opportunity, my lord. It seems all you Japanese are fiercely tenacious. Very well. Proceed, counsel. I mean, I don't know how he actually sounds.
Hold it!
Can you say you don't know who actually issued the directive? Hey, that's right. All I can be sure of is that it was official. But if it was from the prosecutor's office, that narrows it down to who could have issued it straight away. And it wasn't me. I cannot even say with certainty it did originate from the prosecutor's office. What? There's no telling where it started, but there's a fair chance it came from higher up the ladder. Basically. I cannot give you any indication who was behind it. You can't be serious. All we can say for sure is that the order must have come from somebody in authority, I suppose. The likes of us on the ground, as it were, then ain't bother with a little speculation. We just get the job done.
Hold it!
So, Mr. Vigil, you didn't know anything about it at all. That's right. My only role in the scheme was as a scapegoat. That's right, isn't it, Governor? Dang. Some poor beggar had to take the rap for it. Alright then. Who else didn't know about the plan? I have no first idea, laddie. My part in the whole business was basically just dealing with the aftermath. But But I wouldn't be surprised if there were other folk in the prison service who would have given similar orders. So you don't know who else was involved? Aye, that's right. All I can tell you is that the night it actually happened, the person at the reins was Dr. Stevens. Dr. Courtney Stevens. Or Dr. Sith, as she's known now. Oh, why'd I have to get caught up in such a terrible business? How's...
Hold it!
Did you not notice anything unusual happening in the lead up to that night? Oh, everything was unusual. Exception after exception. After all, it was a professor. The man had to terrorize the country as never before with his crimes. And in order to hide his identity, he was forced to wear an iron mask over his head. Hideous treatment. The fellow was surprisingly docile for someone who'd taken the lives of 5 of the country's nobles. Being the chief warder, I was the only person permitted to approach the cell. I can still hardly believe that I was duped by my own country. Welcome to America. I believe you jumped from the window of the governor's office when the jailbreak was blamed on you, didn't you? Alas, Vigil, I cannot apologize enough. No, Governor. I don't believe you can. It won't change what's happened. Dude, that's some tension. And what else can you tell us about the situation, Governor Caden? I don't need to read these parts. I already read them already.
Hold it!
But you've already acknowledged that the orders came from the prosecutor's office arranged for the man's escape. There must have been some sort of negotiation. It's only explanation. Aye, well, be that as it may, I dinna ken nothing about that. The witness stand is no place for telling you what you don't know for sure. That kin much I do know. Then I presume you also know this. Not telling what you do know is a criminal offense. So you were just following orders, is that it? I'm afraid that won't absolve you of guilt here. The man was still killed illegally, even if he was a condemned criminal. You may very well be found complicit in murder, Governor. Well, he doesn't know that. So that's what it to be, is it? Even with the threat of conviction, you won't break your silence.
Hold it!
Did you carry out the plan in its entirety? Aye, I did everything I could at the time. As you know, Ryunosuke was shot dead in Logate Cemetery after the escape. Tell me, was that part of the plan too? My instructions were to do with the job good at the jail and nothing more. I can't tell you anything about what happened after that. Only, personally, I believe his death was the last part of the plan.
What does this all mean? Excuse me.
Mr. Vigil, is something wrong? Oh, he's having a trauma. Oh! Yes, sir. What can I do for you, sir? It's me, George Bailey. He's saluting now? What is it? Some sort of Barclay convention? What Governor Caden was just saying seemed to upset you. Did it bring something to mind, perhaps? For the last 10 years, I've completely blotted out the memories of that time from my mind. I was betrayed by my superiors in the name of my country. Just as my father was betrayed, it seems. But you see, thinking back now, I really can't imagine that shooting of Mr. Asogi at the cemetery is ever part of the plan. What makes you think that? Well, it just doesn't make sense, does it? To make the man admit to crimes he didn't commit with the promise of a jailbreak only to kill him in the end. That's treachery of the worst kind, but the point is, if the intention was always to betray him, why would there be any need for all the itineraries of an escape? That's what I'm thinking too. If it was the plan to kill him, why not just actually execute him? That would clean itself up nicely, wouldn't it? Ah. Yes, that's quite true. If whoever negotiated with Asogi never intended to keep his or her into the bargain, It would have been far simpler to just let the man be executed as the person as dictated by his sentence. Exactly. It all happened in that vast chamber of secrets that is Barclay, behind the high prison walls. I suppose nobody knows what really went on in the execution room now. Yes, it's an unsettling mystery, certainly. Truth be told, there is a wee matter that's never quite made sense to me. If you believe there was some kind of negotiation behind the jailbreak between the Sogi and the body at the top, it doesn't quite add up, does it? Governor Caden, I must insist that you explain these doubts you have by admitting your formal testimony. Yes! Hang on then. Dude, he's so scary. Bro, I had Ganondorf vibes from that man from the beginning of the series. It seems to me that the Japanese fella didn't have nothing left to bargain with. Admitting to the crimes, that was what he had to bargain with, surely. I can't say that myself. After all, did the prosecutors have no conclusive evidence against the carrier? This, you mean, discovered during the final victim's autopsy. There's every possibility this conclusive evidence was fabricated by Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office.
Objection.
Possibilities are all very well, but nothing has been proven. You can all hear about misconduct at the trial 10 years ago all you like. But if you can't establish that it happened with hard evidence, no one's going to listen. Where am I? That's right. So what I'm saying is, the convict had nothing. Nothing he could use for any kind of bargaining at all. The witness makes an astute point. Logically, it would seem no negotiation could have taken place. Except the papers. And yet, the plan to break the man out of prison was definitely put into practice. So he must have been armed with something that gave him an angle to negotiate. So Sogi-san agreed to confess to the crimes because he was assured he'd be broken out of prison later. I really don't think that Kazuma-sama's father would have engaged in such negotiations, and perhaps something compelled him to agree. What a terrible thing. Using the law to legitimize such underhanded dealings with a desperate man, only to double-cross him in the end. It's quite the opposite of justice. I can't help feeling there's something about this apparent negotiation that doesn't quite add up. Something doesn't quite add up. Naruhodo? No, it doesn't. But I can't quite put my finger on it yet. Well, in that case, we must keep digging until we identify the problem. Let's stop this right here. Confessing under oath to murders he didn't commit on a verbal assurance of later being broken out of prison. Genshin Isogi was taking an incredibly risky gamble. Very true. There was nothing to stop the British breaking their word and executing him behind closed doors anyway. Under normal circumstances, no man would stake his life on a gentleman's agreement like that. Which means that Isogi must have had a trump card. Something that guaranteed he wouldn't be betrayed. Some kind of weapon. Heavens, that fella couldn't have possibly have had anything like that. But you know what he did? But you know that he did, Governor. The Isogi Papers. The name given to the last will and testament of Genshin Isogi. It turns out that Mr. Isogi was hiding his will in his cell at Barclay. Chief Warder of Vigil caught him with it one day. You squealed, didn't you, you wee rat? Didn't I tell you to keep that a secret? You can't touch me now. Gah! When Mr. Vigil caught sight of that will through the bars of the convict cell, Mr. Isogi pleaded with the warder. Alright then, but what's on that paper? The last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. A weapon! And after the convict had been killed following the elaborate pretense of the jailbreak, that document mysteriously disappeared, didn't it? Well, yes. All the prison warder searched through the belongings in his cell, but that will was just nowhere to be found. As I understand it, an exhaustive search was made for the document, which became known as the Isogi Papers. Governor Caden, I believe you ordered your prison staff to find it at all costs, didn't you? Eh! Would I be right in saying that you knew? You knew that the so-called Asogi papers had the potential to make great waves somehow. James, what the blazes are you blathering about? The wheel is found right and proper. In the fella's cell where I said it would be. But how could that be? Where in his cell? We all searched the place from top to bottom. Well, you didn't do a proper job, eh, ye peely-waddy galoot? You can't criticize me now. I showed it to ya for did I know? You're a lawyer. Yes, you did. I have the document here. It's written in Japanese and reads, The Last Will and Testament of Genshin Asogi. Which means everything is as it should be. Not quite, my lord. You see, there's an undeniable inconsistency here. What? What inconsistency? Mr. Asogi described this document as the only weapon he had left, and yet this will contains nothing of significance at all. Nothing that would have given the convict any leverage. Are you suggesting, my learned friend, that the last will and testament stored at Barclay Prison all these years is actually a fake? Dang Skippy. As has clearly been demonstrated already, what went on at Barclay Prison was far from above board. That last vindication by the defense was an affront to the entire British legal system. Okay. Something just dawned on me, and I need to check the court record now. I have never examined Karuma. Karuma, the great blade. It's such a thing of beauty. I want to gaze on it for hours. Okay, well, we know the tip's missing. The tip of the great sword. Broken. Such a shame. It's been so meticulously cared for over the years. You can almost hear Karuma's sobs. God must have really taken a swing for that to happen. Okay, but not that. No, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I feel like if he was to store information somewhere, it would be somewhere, like, in his belongings, and I would think it would be the sword. But I can't inspect anything here. So either I'm way off the mark, or it's something that you can't find by examining it. Anyway, let's continue. And this absurd notion of a weapon is something for which we only have the former chief warder's word. The man could quite easily be lying, or at the very least, sorely mistaken. What? No! I definitely heard him say that, I swear! To the Genshin official website. Clearly we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to know exactly what happened with these so-called Asogi papers. A waste of time. If the will was fake, where's the real document? That's the question, isn't it? $1 million question. Mr. Vigil was stabbed in the back by the judiciary 10 years ago. He lost everything, very nearly his own life. And now you're going to do it again. You're ready to brand him a liar and turn your back on him without even letting him defend himself. It's clear that Barclay Prison is hiding something. It's clear that the jailbreak was masterminded by somebody in the prosecutor's office. It's clear that some illicit negotiations took place. Is your lordship going to gloss over these obvious things? What did you say? We should hear more from the chief's warder. Have him testify again. The trial must go on. The man's voice must be heard. I love hearing them chant testify, bro. It gives me chills. It would seem that a vocal few here are utterly blind to the truth. Very well, then. Let the witness testify again. Tell the court precisely what you think you saw of the convict's last will and testament. Yes, sir, my lord. He's still got the bruise. As the warder responsible for the condemned convict, I attended Mr. Ryunosuke and kept watch over his cell. Right? But we can't prove it, so it means nothing. On the night after he was found guilty in court, he was doing something with that will in his cell. We turned the sentence out for looking for it after the execution, but to no avail. I only found out about the Hoagie papers when a directive came telling me to impound them. The document was in the folds of the fella's robe that was left in his cell. A kimono, I think it's called. And his kimono? That's a lie. We searched every inch of the man's cell. We looked through all of his clothes. It can't be true. Were you not satisfied with calling me a liar once? You way finger. There's nothing you can do about it now. You don't have any hold over me anymore. Other than the hold you'd like to take on my kavat, of course. Is that what you're going to do, is it? Bro, Are you going to give me a good shake again? Or are you too scared? Gah! Little and large. What a double act. We compiled Ryunosuke's will as far as was possible. Complied. All of his personal effects were delivered to his family at home in Japan, as a courtesy to the homeland of the most notorious killer our country has ever seen. Why are we flapping his ball? And we were much obliged. I can confirm that all my father's belongings arrived safely. Oi, and you can't deny the handwriting that of your old man. Yes, there's no mistaking that it's my father's brushwork. Really? And this last will and testament was the man's last weapon, was it? I think we can safely assume that the convict was merely prattling, knowing that his end was nigh. So, counsel for the defense, your cross-examination, please. Yes, my lord. I don't know who did this in an hour. These guides are nuts. So, would that mean that you converse with Mr. Ryunosuke? Yeah, certainly. Though there was precious little time before his execution was due. He was remarkably calm, considering his days were very much numbered. In all honesty, he really didn't strike one as a man capable of mass murder. Yet he confessed in full to the crimes. I know. That's why I felt compelled to ask him one day. I can still recall his reply. I'm guilty of the irreparable crime of ending another human's life, yes. But he was so tranquil and intelligent, it put me in the mind of an Eastern holy man. And what about the will you saw him with? What can you tell us about that? We can't read Japanese. It was the beginning of all the drama. I remember it very well, yes. And he pleaded with you not to report him, didn't he? Yes, that's right. And like that bampot yar, you didn't tell me a blatant breach of trust it was. I could see that the man had a noble spirit. I found myself wanting to treat him accordingly. But according to what you told us 2 days ago, the convict had been strictly forbidden from having any writing materials whatsoever. Yes, you're quite right. So when exactly was the will penned? It was before the man remained in Barclay, obviously. Yes, at the prosecutor's office, under the supervision of the relevant authorities. I personally instructed the Sogi to make a will for the benefit of his family in his homeland. In that case, why was it found in his cell? Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if it was pinned at the prosecutor's office, you would have expected it to remain there for safekeeping, surely. Oh! It's curious. There doesn't seem to be any obvious explanation for why it was subsequently found in the convict's cell. Oh, well. The defense makes an astute point. Well, Governor? A prison governor cannot be expected to hear the inner workings of the prosecutor's office. In that case, Lord Strongheart, perhaps you can shed some light on the matter. I'm unable to offer an explanation here and now. I would have to consult with the notary responsible for the will at the time. The fact that my father's will was discovered in his cell is clearly inconsistent with what was expected. I want to know why. Another inexplicable mystery, then. Well, the thing is about that will. It was the governor who ordered the search for the will, as I understand it. Is that right? Yes, and when I reported back to him, he couldn't find it. He grabbed me by the cravat and yelled, It cannot have disappeared completely in my face. Aye, well, it's done the governor to keep everybody working as hard as they should. I think the governor needs a wee taste of his own medicine, Mr. Naruhodo. The point is, it was clearly considered a very important document, wasn't it? But it proved impossible to find. That's right. Then before I knew it, it was in the morning paper. That blood-curdling article. The executed mass murderer who'd risen from the dead. Oh, you mean the article based on Mr. Dripper's experience in Lowgate Cemetery? Yes, that was it. The day after I read that news, I was summoned to the governor's office. And that's when the awful accusation was made. That you'd aided Genshin Asogi to escape from the prison, resulting in your immediate dismissal. I'm afraid I really don't remember anything after that. As the governor of the prison, I had no choice. I couldn't have done anything else. And that directive came from the same source as the one instructing you about the jailbreak. Aye, from the top levels of the prosecutor's office. One name was on it. I didn't keen afore, I didn't keen now. All I can tell you is the orders were to do everything in my power to find that document. The directive said it had to be somewhere inside the fella's cell. Document. Was that the wording? Document, not will. Aye, that's what it said. Am I clutching at straws here? I just wonder if it was really Genshin Asogi's last will and testament that that directive was after. Of course it wasn't. Continue with your testimony then, witness. I haven't found anything yet. In Mr. Asogi's kimono. Aye, the one he brought with him when he was locked up. Yes, he was permitted to have his personal effects with him during his incarceration, I understand. That's right. He was granted as much freedom as possible during the few days before his execution. Indeed, he had a number of items of personal significance, I remember. He was very reluctant to part with them. Some books, that kimono, his sword. His sword! Karuma, the famous sword of the Asogi clan. It bears the soul of my family. I don't doubt it, but I wasn't really getting at that. Forgive me, the soul of the clan. Could the man have had a more obvious weapon? Have some respect, Ryunosuke! Respectful silence? The warders carry firearms at all times, and the inmates have shackles around their ankles. He couldn't have hurt anybody with that thing. Still, he was allowed a sword, but no writing materials. Aye. He wrote that will afore he came to stay with us at Barclay, you see. Dr. Megatoba was asked to bring the necessary Japanese writing implements to the prosecutor's office. A Shijiri inkstone, black sumi ink, and some Hanshi rice paper, no doubt. I was present when he wrote it, but I'm sorry to say, the letters just looked like squirming, jet black earworms to me. Yo, finally something. Are you feeling faint, Mr. Vigil? Mr. Vigil! Sir! It was Scarlet, sir! What? Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Wait a second. Where was that document at? Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. But wait, but wait a minute, but that was on Clint's thing, though. That's the thing that confuses me. So he wrote whatever this paper was in his blood, but he couldn't have cut himself with the ring. It was impounded, so it could have been karma. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to burn it out like that. Oh my goodness. Oh. Less waiting and more explaining would be helpful. Is it something about the testimony we just heard? Have you recalled something of importance? Something of importance. Possibly. Or possibly not. I'm unable to tell which way he's leaning, I'm afraid. My lord, the defense asks Mr. Vigil be permitted to supplement his testimony with this possibly or possibly not important detail. Permission granted. Go ahead, Mr. Vigil. I asked it was scarlet. I don't remember it. The document was written in scarlet ink, but perhaps I'm mistaken. Scarlet, you say? Well, yes. I mean, I only caught sight of it for a brief moment, of course. But even by the dim light in the cell, I remember thinking it was an unusual color. At the very least, I'm quite sure it wasn't black. Witness? Is that really what you saw? Ah, what? Sir! Is something wrong, Lord Strongheart? I apologize. Continue. What do you make of that, Mr. Naruhodo? For Lord Strongheart to be so visibly shaking in that way. Oh, didn't he ever? You can see plenty of writing yet as black as the Earl's Wales waistcoat. Well, yeah, that's alright. Mr. Vigil, I'd like to confirm one point with you. Did you actually see the content of the document that Osogi was holding up that night? Well, of course he didn't. He can't read Japanese. Oh, well, no, there was no time. As soon as he noticed me there, he hid it behind his back. But it was definitely a will, was it? Yes, it was. That's what Mr. Osogi told me. The court need waste no further time on the matter. We have the will in question in our possession. There is nothing more to add. A will written in scarlet ink. What did Mr. Vigil really see Kazuma's father holding? I wonder. If you have an inkling, Mr. Naruhodo, you must present it to the court at once. That testimony doesn't give much away. So this will really was penned by Kazuma-sama's father. I wonder what he could possibly have meant when he described it as a weapon. Starting to sound very much like Mr. Sogi actually had nothing. But the plan to break him out of jail went ahead, which means he must have had some bargaining power. He must have been hiding something. It's the only explanation that makes sense. It's starting to sound like Mr. Sogi might actually have had something. Which is it, Mr. Naruhodo? I'm not sure, but I feel as though I'm on the brink of understanding all this. Let's listen to all the information again and see what more we can learn. We can't overlook even the smallest detail. Absolutely. No! Frick me. I didn't mean to go that far. It's so easy for it to lag and just push me forward. Okay. Do I have any documents written in red ink? Or red anything? Let's see. That's black. Well, I can't look at this picture. Scarlet-colored writing is what you said you thought you saw, Mr. Vigil. And I believe that's exactly what you did see. What? Havers again! You have no evidence to say that! Have a look at this report. That's my brother's autopsy report. Yes, and there's something in here that's bothered me since I first read it. It states that scarlet-colored ink stains were noted on the fingers of the victim's right hand. Yes, so it does. Scarlet ink. Now, I'm not familiar with the habits of the British aristocracy, I freely admit, but I would hazard a guess that they don't go all around with ink stains on their fingertips, do they? Your feat is not appreciated. My brother was a well-bred and fastidious man. Should ink have sullied his fingertips, he would have cleansed them immediately. What is your point, counsel? My point is this. Whatever Lord Clint Van Zeeks was writing in that unusually colored ink, it must have been directly before his death. Because he died before he had the opportunity to clean his hand. But what if he gave that to Asogi? Or to Genshin? What? I remember something troubled me at the time. At the scene, the lid of my brother's ink vial was open. But Clint was punctilious about such things. It seemed unusual, and no document pinned in the color of that ink was ever found. So the document had disappeared. Are you suggesting that the document my father had in his hand that night in the cell was the same document Lord Clint Van Zeeks was writing moments before his death? Then it was.